Well, hey folks, this video is going to start with a tribute to a recently fallen hero, Chief Wayne Tarwater of the Ogden Utah Police Department. Then, in a twist, the defense in Utah versus Kouri Richins rested without calling a single witness, and Kouri waived her right to testify.
You consulted with Ms. Richins about her, or advised Ms. Richins about her right to testify, correct?
At length.
Okay. Ms. Richins, may I ask you two direct questions?
Yes.
Do you understand that you have the right to testify at trial?
Yes, I do.
Are you following your attorney's advice and waiving your right to testify at trial?
Yes, I am.
I accept your waiver. I find it's knowing and voluntary.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, the state rests its case.
Very good. Ms. Lewis.
Your Honor, after consulting with our client, the defense rests.
Understood. Thank you.
Closing arguments are starting in a few minutes, and the jury deliberation is going to be the only thing that stands between a verdict and us. So let's talk about the defense teams and why they sometimes do what Kouri Richins' team did, and remind ourselves that this defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, before we begin, I want to take a moment for a personal note, because a few days ago, I lost a friend and a neighbor, Chief Wayne Tarwater. Wayne and I worked the streets together many years ago. We sat in surveillance vans. We grew up in the administrative side of policing. Him in Ogden, Utah, and me at the Attorney General's office. But I always felt like I was the student, and that Wayne was the master who had already figured it all out. Wayne had a level of self-control and integrity that you don't see every day. He didn't have to talk about it, he just lived it, and I'm really honored that we were friends. I'll never forget him stepping into the job as chief of police behind Chief John Greiner just days before 6 police officers were shot and wounded in a drug bust. One of them died, Jared Frankham. He was killed in that gun battle, and Wayne carried that weight of leadership with a steadiness and a class that I'll never forget. He never forgot his officers. He never forgot his staff. A few years ago, while I was at the memorial wall in Washington, D.C. for fallen police officers, I recovered Jared Frankham's name off of the wall, and I wrote a little note on the back of it to Wayne. I held on to it, and I hate to admit it, but I forgot to deliver it to him. But today, I did. I put it in Wayne's wife's hands, a reminder that we should all kind of follow the promptings when they come, because we might not get the chance once we put it off. Now, I'm grateful, truly grateful, that I got to visit Wayne one last time just a few days before he died. We laughed and we swapped war stories and we talked about the good old days. It felt like things, including his illness, kind of slowed down for a minute. And I will carry that with me for a long time. So, Chief, thanks for the example, the friendship, and for showing multiple generations of police officers what it looks like to lead with restraint, with courage, and with a clean conscience. Rest easy, Wayne. Well, welcome to Profiling Evil, and before we jump in, I hope you'll take a second, hit the like and subscribe button, and ring the bell so that you get all of the notifications you need to get in time. Please ring the bell. Make sure you're sharing us with your friends. Hit that little hype button. Hype us up. And again, let's get this thing going now. Now, I want to talk about a twist that you don't see every day, especially in cases that have gotten as much attention as the Kouri Richins murder trial. The prosecution concluded their case and rested after 3 weeks of testimony. In a surprise move, The defense also rested without calling a single witness. Now, if you've been watching trials for a long time, you know that this doesn't happen very often. But when it does, it makes you sit up and think about things because it's really pretty dang dramatic. And I think it's important to state that the murder charges are simply allegations at this point. And until a jury returns, Kouri Richins is presumed innocent. Now, those closing statements, that closing moment of argument is going to happen in just a few minutes. The presumption is important, though, because resting without a defense witness coming on the stand looks strange to the public, but it can be completely consistent with the defense team's strategy, frankly saying, hey, the state didn't prove the case, and we're not going to help them fix it. So the question becomes, what happens and what does it mean when the defense rests without calling a witness? Now, multiple outlets have reported the same basic sequence, that the state rested, defense rested without calling witnesses. And closing statements are beginning in a few minutes, but here's where the jury instructions are really going to be vital, and the judge has just completed the jury instructions. So from the beginning, there have been numerous arguments over witnesses, disputes over language, the kind of language that defines proof beyond a reasonable doubt, including the common firmly convincing wording. Well, that firmly convinced phrase is not new or unique to this case. It's a widely used definition of reasonable doubt standards, and that comes out in jury instruction, including federal instructions that are used in Utah and everywhere else in the country. But this case, a state case. The real question, the one that I keep getting from those of you out there who are writing me, is why would the defense rest without calling a witness? Well, defense teams rest without witnesses for one big reason, in my opinion, and that is the burden of proof is not on them. The burden's on the prosecution to prove every element beyond a reasonable doubt. That means the defense is allowed to say, hey, we don't have to prove anything. We just have to show that the state didn't prove enough. And sometimes the defense truly believes that the smartest move is to keep the record exactly where it was when the state rested, arguing reasonable doubt. Now, there's some practical reasons to not put on witnesses if you're the defense. Every defense witness is a new target that the prosecution could cross-examine. It places the defense witness in a position where the prosecution can pick apart their credibility, show biases, show prior statements, criminal history, other inconsistencies. But it's also where a witness can accidentally say things that open the door to evidence that the judge had previously kept out. Well, hey folks, we're watching closing arguments in the Kouri Richins murder trial. This one is really ramping up, and I want to pause just quickly enough to remind you that CrimeCon is right around the corner, May 29th through the 31st. And if you're planning on attending CrimeCon, you can take advantage of my special discount code. Enter the word Profiling Evil, one word, inside that box when you're registering, and it'll get you a great discount. And then watch for me at CrimeCon. Make sure you come up and say hi, and please come to my presentation on the big stage. I'm going to be talking about coercive control, the root of all evil. We'll see you at CrimeCon. So if the defense thinks that their witness is going to bleed on the stand, they might decide that it's better not to call them at all. It's actually a smart move. And another reason to not have a defendant testify is that, viewers say, hey, if I was innocent, I'd take the stand. Well, emotionally, I can get that. But in court, a defendant testifying is one of the riskiest moves there is. If the defendant takes the stand, prosecutors can cross-examine them, and that can be dangerous. That's why you'll see the court confirm on record that the defendant, Kouri Richins, personally waived the right to testify. She said, I'm not going to do it. And that's why juries are instructed that they can't hold it against the defendant for not testifying. But again, a defense strategy. And most defense attorneys don't want the defendant testifying. Now, when the defense doesn't call witnesses, the closing arguments can become cleaner too. Kind of a repetitive drumbeat of, hey, you had weeks, you had resources, you still can't answer the question. You can't prove X element of this crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And it actually is an effective tool, especially if the defense thinks that the prosecution's case is circumstantial or complicated or dependent on witnesses who have baggage. This case had it all. So when the defense puts on a case, the prosecution would again get a chance to come back with rebuttal evidence as well. And that can be the state's opportunity to clean up something that's messy or clarify a timeline or bring in another witness that ties a bow around something. If the defense thinks the state is already done, don't give them another inning is what it's all about. And resting can be a way to keep the finish line close in view and more reliable. Because the defense is betting on the standard of proof, and the judge hammered on that in the instructions. This is the part that people miss oftentimes, because beyond a reasonable doubt is a really high standard, and jurors are instructed that that means that if the evidence has to leave them firmly convinced, and if it doesn't, then they cannot find them guilty. And if the jury thinks there's a real possibility that the defendant's not guilty, they've got to give the defendant the benefit of the doubt. Now, Kouri Richins' defense team might look at the case this way. They might be thinking, hey, if we can poke enough holes in the prosecution's case, if we can emphasize the unknowns, we can argue that they couldn't prove timing, they couldn't prove delivery, they couldn't prove source or intent. And they could do all of that without putting someone on the stand. They're going to rest without calling anyone. In essence, this case, they're saying that the state hasn't put on a convincing case. And I think that's what you're going to hear in the closing argument in a moment. So when the defense rests without calling witnesses, it might mean that the state's case has been strong and the defense doesn't have a safe witness to put out there. It might even mean that the state is planning on the defense putting a witness up, hoping that it would open the door for testimony that the judge previously blocked. So you can start to see the chess pieces moving around. And if the defense counsel thinks that the state failed on a key element, then calling defense witnesses could actually dilute their argument. Because the jurors might think, well, they didn't explain that very well, or they might get distracted by side issues. So if jurors can see a defense witness struggling, they might decide that's not helping the defendant's cause. All reasons why the defense wouldn't put on a witness. So it appears that the defense's position is that there's no murder weapon, no fentanyl recovered. The state can't say how it was administered. They can theorize, but they haven't proven Kouri did anything. In the defense side of the house, and this is important to think about, the fact that bad character doesn't equate to murder. There may be an even longer play in their plans, though, kind of a hidden strategy that takes this hit today but plans for an appeal down the road. And that's what I want to talk about next, because I think it might be part of the strategy. In criminal trials, one of the most important legal issues is the sufficiency of the evidence. Sometimes by keeping the record clean, it helps that argument, because the defense doesn't have to present new evidence. So they can avoid creating new facts that a reviewing court might say cured the gaps or the confusion that was there. And this is what appellate courts focus on heavily in looking at the trial record. And the defense teams are constantly looking at ways in which they can argue that at a later point. So when the defense rests, jury instructions and closing arguments become even more important. Now, if the defense is not calling witnesses, they want instructions that highlight credibility, emphasizing the state's burden. And the prosecution wants instructions that keep the jury focused on the evidence that they put in. They want to avoid anything that suggests that the jury should automatically distrust the key witnesses out there. And frankly, sometimes the defense has evidence that would help them, but that evidence would come with baggage. It might open the door to prior bad acts or to a damaging expert. Maybe it invites the prosecution the ability to introduce more digital evidence. And this is a little repetitive of what I've already said, but this is the key to this. The defense is saying, in this case, no thanks. We're going to argue what's already in. And when the defense rests without witnesses, it puts closing arguments under a microscope. So I want you to watch for the defense to argue that the state had every chance to prove the case. They still can't answer the key questions. They're still relying on assumptions. They're saying that the burden is beyond reasonable doubt, not beyond suspicion. And that's where, in their opinion, the state has failed. But as we've heard, expect the prosecution to say you don't need a confession or a video. You need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And they're going to say, we gave you a timeline. We gave you a motive, witness testimony, digital evidence, all of it pointing to one conclusion. The conclusion is, they say, Kouri Richins killed her husband, Eric. Then the jury's going to get their instructions and they're going to go in and deliberate. And remember, the jury's instructed not to hold it against Kouri Richins that she didn't testify. This is really important. And so as we're watching virtually, we can't get too wrapped around the axles that one side rested without witnesses. It's not an admission of anything. It might be a well-planned strategy. And it doesn't automatically mean that the defense is confident or that the state has a slam dunk case. It just means that the defense decided the risks of putting on evidence outweighed the benefits that might come from that. And this leaves a jury trying to make sense of the evidence that both sides are battling over. I mean, think about the battle over the walk the dog letter. That has been crazy. The phrase walk the dog came up in testimony, and documents have been discussed publicly in this case about this thing. It's the kind of phrase that became symbolic in the coverage because I guess it sounds unusual and casual at the same time. But the meaning is what's going to really be important, and how the jury views the meaning of those letters. In the end, jurors aren't going to decide on symbolism, though. They're going to have to decide on the evidence and the elements in the instructions. And I think the verdict is going to come back rather quickly. Now, that brings us right back to where we started. Charges against Kouri Richins are only allegations. She's presumed innocent right now until a jury returns with either an acquittal or a finding of guilt. So let's catch the closing arguments.
Kouri Richins feels aggrieved and is thus an intensely ambitious person. She feels aggrieved because growing up, her father was an alcoholic who traded parenting for prison, and her mother a gambler who traded parenting for a casino. Kouri Richins thus worked for her aunt, cleaning the homes of rich people in Park City. She was not beneath those homeowners, but she felt that she was. This fueled in her an intense desire to appear privileged, affluent, and successful. She met Eric Richins. He was a successful business owner. He had money. They had a son, married, and had 2 more sons. Kouri Richins was on her way. But she was unhappy. She wanted to leave Eric Richins, but did not want to leave his money. Their prenuptial agreement meant that if she left him, she would also leave most of his money. So, Kouri Richins took $250,000 in equity out of Eric Richins' home without him knowing it so that she could start her own business and earn enough money to leave Eric Richins. Kouri Richins is intensely ambitious. First with Eric's money and then other people's money, Kouri Richins carefully curated the facade of a privileged, affluent, successful business owner. Behind the facade, however, Kouri Richins was incompetent. She took tremendous risks. She borrowed money by any means necessary at exorbitant rates. She gambled other people's money and lost. Her business was imploding. All the while, Kouri Richins was more interested in spending time with Josh Grossman than Eric. She dreamed of living in the Midway Mansion with Josh, running it as an event center, farming and raising kids. Eric's kids. But she did not have the money to leave Eric or the money to salvage her business. Kouri Richins is an intensely ambitious person. She is a risk taker. There was a way forward. Eric had to die. As Judge Mrazek just instructed, there are 5 counts. And each count has a series of elements. The state has to prove each count and each element of each count beyond a reasonable doubt. That is our burden. In this closing, we will go count by count and then within each count, element by element, to show to you how the state has met its burden of proving aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, 2 counts of fraud, and forgery. That, again, is the reasonable doubt instruction that Judge Mrazek just read, and you will have back with you in the jury room. Judge Mrazek also read this instruction on what evidence is, and it's usually testimony and exhibits. To reiterate, what the attorneys say is not evidence. And as I asked you in opening, please focus on the evidence. Throughout this presentation, I generally use this format for slides. And so everybody understands where we are, the count, and then the element within the count is at the top in the red banner. We then quote some witness testimony, and we cite it because it's the evidence that matters. So that you'll have the exhibits back with you when you deliberate, and you can reference them. Usually it's a transcript, page, line, number of the testimony. We also publish exhibits. And usually we'll have an exhibit number down here. If there's an exhibit, whatever, 2-5, so you can reference it. Let's begin with the aggravated murder count. The evidence will prove that Kouri Richins was the person who committed the aggravated murder. The evidence will prove that she intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Eric Richins, here by means of administering to him the illicit street drugs that she purchased from Carmen Lauber. She intended to kill him, with the illicit street drugs. It doesn't matter what illicit street drugs. We'll get into it more. It doesn't matter if it was the propofol, if it was the fentanyl that actually killed him, if it was oxy or some other illicit street drugs. She bought illicit street drugs to kill Eric Richins. That's what matters. That's murder. These two elements are just murder. Right? If we hide this, that's a murder charge. Here we have an aggravated murder charge, and the state will prove two separate and distinct aggravators. The first is for pecuniary gain. This is a why aggravator. Why did Kouri Richins kill Eric? For money. The second aggravator is a how aggravator. How did she do it? Here, by the administration of any substance, here it happens to be fentanyl, but it could be any substance administered in a lethal amount. Either one of those aggravators are what transforms this case from a murder case to an aggravated murder case. So, first count, first element, was it Kouri Richins? Yes. The state has proved that Kouri Richins had the means, here the fentanyl, the illicit street drugs, the motive, here money, and a fresh start at life, and the opportunity to kill Eric Richins. She was the only other adult in the home at the time. Nobody else killed Eric Richins. Now, intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Eric Richins by administering the illicit street drugs. The state will prove with all kinds of evidence, testimony, exhibits, patterns of her behavior, and what each of us know about humans, that she intended to cause Eric's death. She intended it probably as early as December the 7th, 2021, when she booked a trip for her and Josh Grossman to the Caribbean for April. People don't book that trip. Kouri Richins did not book that trip thinking Eric Richins would be alive in April. She booked it knowing he would not. In December, before Eric died, before Kouri Richins murdered Eric, she told her friend, Becky Lloyd, in many ways it would be better if he were dead. That proves she intended to cause his death. This was the New York Life policy that covered the C&E buy-sell agreement. And on January the 1st, 2022, Kouri Richins changed the life insurance beneficiary on Cody's policy from Eric to her. The evidence proves that Kouri Richins didn't understand that was Cody's policy. And when she figured it out, she went ahead and changed it back, because she planned to murder Eric. She did not plan to murder Cody. But she planned to murder. Kouri Richins asked two people, Hayden Jeffs and Carmen Lauber, for the Michael Jackson drug. Kouri Richins was a suburban mother real estate agent. She does not know a lot about the illicit street drug world. but she knows Michael Jackson died from taking drugs. She doesn't know how to order a street drug, but she knows she wants the Michael Jackson stuff. She knows she wants it because it is lethal, it is fatal, it kills. And she wanted lethal, fatal death. Kouri Richins is intensely ambitious. She wanted the perfect life, or at least the appearance of the perfect life. And for her, that meant Josh Grossman. But first, Eric had to go away.
So with these transactions, when Carmen hit you up, what did she tell you?
She just told me that she had a friend that wanted,
Did she ask for blue specifically or fentanyl specifically, or did she ask for oxys, or what did she ask for?
I think she might have asked me for blue. I can't remember.
But you sold her M30, right?
Yeah, I told her what she knew what she was buying.
Okay, so it wasn't like she's asking for oxys or something like that, and she got the M30.
Right, no.
Okay. So she knew that there was fentanyl in those pills.
Absolutely.
At Kouri Richins' request, Carmen Lauber purchased illicit street drugs from Robert Crozier. It's those illicit street drugs that killed Eric Richins. It's those illicit street drugs that Kouri used to murder Eric Richins. And while there may be some question as to whether she specifically ordered fentanyl or she knew she was getting fentanyl, the evidence proves she at least knew it. She wanted fatal, lethal, illicit street drugs. And all the testimony from Carmen Lauber, Robert Crozier, digital forensics, we'll get into it, all confirm that Kouri Richins ordered and received illicit street drugs, and that those street drugs contained fentanyl. Is all that matters. But you heard the testimony that despite confusion in what people were ordering, people were getting fentanyl. The fake M30s looked like the real, the fake M30s looked like the real M30s. Everything on the street in early 2022 had fentanyl. That's how we know that it was this purchase that ended up killing Eric. It's the fentanyl. We can trace the fentanyl. Next slide. The digital forensics corroborate Carmen Lauber's testimony that 5 days before Kouri Richins murdered Eric Richins, Carmen Lauber purchased for Kouri Richins fentanyl from Robert Crozier at the Maverick in Draper. The call detail records show an extraordinary amount of overlapping communication between Carmen Lauber, Kouri Richins, Carmen Lauber, Robert Crozier during that time. We, of course, don't have the communications. Carmen Lauber deleted them because they were evidence of a drug deal. Kouri Richins deleted them because they were evidence of a drug deal and a murder. Robert Crozier said he had lost his phone. But that's an extraordinary number of communications. We know that Kouri Richins, the evidence proves that Kouri Richins used a Moscow Mule and a shot to administer the fentanyl to Eric. She writes it in her orange notebook where she journals what happened the night she murdered Eric. It's a self-serving journal. We'll discuss that down the road. But she wrote Moscow Mule and a lemon drop shot. And that is consistent with all the toxicology. Again, in the notes that investigators recovered from the kitchen cabinet in Kouri Richins' home, she wrote Moscow Mules. Lemon water, vodka, and rum. She left out the main ingredient, which of course is the ginger beer. But there was ginger beer. We know that from the Cock and Bull that OME investigator Cam Sessions found in the trash can in the kitchen. It's interesting that Kouri Richins wrote vodka, in parentheses, rum. The evidence may show that the Moscow Mule she made that night was ginger beer and fentanyl. The lemon drop shot may be lemon and fentanyl. Notice that here she writes drink in bed. We'll come back to that in a minute. The Cock and Bull, as I mentioned, corroborates at least a Moscow Mule. And that we know the cause of death from the death certificate was fentanyl. The fentanyl and the illicit street drugs that Kouri Richins got from Carmen Lauber, who got from Robert Crozier. We know that Eric ingested the fentanyl from the Moscow Mule, the lemon drop shop, or both. Medical examiner Dr. Pamela Ulmer, toxicologist Brianna Peterson, chief medical examiner Dr. Eric Christensen, all testified that the 20,000 nanograms per milliliter of fentanyl, an extraordinary amount, in his stomach indicates oral ingestion. Indeed, Dr. Christensen not only testified to it, he told Kouri Richins that in their phone call that she recorded. Ms. Peterson's testimony, as well as Dr. Christensen, also proves that the fentanyl was illicit. Again, illicit coming from the street, illegal street drug, illicit fentanyl. And it was their testimony, right, was that there was not only fentanyl in the toxicology, but there was norfentanyl, which was a marker of an illicit fentanyl. There's also acetyl fentanyl as well. But it's the norfentanyl that is a marker of illicit fentanyl, which completely tracks with how Kouri Richins got the illicit street drugs. We also know that Kouri Richins intended to kill Eric Richins because the toxicology contained quetiapine.
Let's reset. My apologies.
Is an antipsychotic medication.
Last one. What is quetiapine? Quetiapine?
Quetiapine is an antipsychotic medication. It's called Seroquel.
Okay. I gotcha.
It's a prescription, mental health medication that's prescribed for different things.
I gotcha.
The quetiapine in the toxicology for Eric Richins shows that Kouri Richins was involved because she was prescribed quetiapine. Now, this conversation that she recorded with Dr. Christensen is also very insightful. She pretends to not know what quetiapine is. It's her prescription. Of course she knows what it is. She pretends to not know what it is to cover up her involvement in putting the quetiapine inside Eric's body. She feigns the ignorance. She covers up her conduct in murdering Eric Richins in several ways throughout, beginning the night she murdered him, all the way through the walk the dog letter. In the orange notebook, she writes, she jumped out of bed, ran, turned on the lights, grabbed her phone, and called 911. The evidence proves that is not true. The evidence proves that when she returned to their bedroom, Kouri Richins says she was in Ashton's room. There's no evidence of that. But she returned from somewhere to their bedroom, unlocked her phone, put it on speaker. There's no call detail records showing a call at that time. But she may have called on Wi-Fi, somebody. That would not appear in the call detail records. It would appear on her phone if her phone had not been deleted.
Objection, Your Honor. These are facts that are
Overruled.
not.
Please have a seat.
She then unlocked her phone again at 3:08, 3:10, 3:15, 3:19, 3:19. And then 15 minutes later, she called 911. That is not immediately called 911. Perhaps she was staging the scene during these 15 minutes. We're going to discuss the 911 call in a minute. This is a receiver activation. At 3:22:12, when we're in the 911 call, she's on receiver on her phone. The 911 call operator asks her, "Are you on speakerphone?" She says yes, no. She's on receiver. Before we play this, sorry, we're going to listen to the first part, actually most of the 911 call again. I ask that as you listen to it, you'll hear the first minute. The first minute is not the sound of a wife becoming a widow. To echo her friend Chelsea Barney, The first minute is the sound of a wife becoming a black widow. Listen to how Kouri Richins, on the 911 call, immediately presents, or very soon after the call begins, presents her alibi narrative. Listen to how she tells the 911 dispatcher where she was when Eric died. She is distancing herself. Rather than, he's not breathing, he has no pulse, I have to figure out what to do, I need help, she's saying, hey, look, I was not there, I was in my son's room. That's her alibi. She's distancing herself from the time and the place that she murdered Eric. The 911 call operator asks her to perform CPR. Notice how she distances herself from that. No, I don't know how. No, he's too heavy. No, I can't move him. She is not immediately trying to revive him. We're going to run a clock from the time that the dispatcher asks her if she can start CPR to the time she purportedly starts it. It's 6 minutes. Listen, please, to the portion of the 911 call where the operator instructs Kouri Richins how to remove Eric from the bed. Listen how the dispatcher says, move to the side of the bed. Kouri Richins says she does. Remove the pillows, pull the arm, pull the leg, lift up the sheath, pull him off. If Kouri Richins is following the instructions of the 911 dispatcher, Eric Richins' body is on the floor on the side of the bed, not the foot of the bed where it was found. Listen also to her choice of language. She has dehumanized Eric Richins. When she is talking about removing Eric from the bed and she is protesting and she is saying she cannot, she is not saying, I can't move him. She is saying, I can't move it. Eric is no longer a him to him. She murdered Eric. Eric is an it. Finally, listen to when she says she is performing CPR and the phone is on speaker. The phone's not on speaker. Determine whether she's performing CPR. Okay, Scott.
My husband's not breathing. He's cold. Okay, what's the address? 282 Willow Court. 282 Willow Court? Uh-huh. Okay, what's a good phone number in case we get disconnected? 435 671 1987. Okay, it's going to be in Francis. Okay, tell me exactly what happened. I don't know. I just came in. I was sleeping with my kids. Okay, I can't understand you. I need you to take a deep breath. What's going on? I don't know. I was sleeping in with my kids. I just came in our bed, and I turned over, and he's just cold. He's just cold. Who's cold? My husband. I turned the light on. And he's not breathing? No. He's not breathing? No. I need you to confirm it for me. Is he not breathing? No. Okay, can you do CPR? No, I don't know how. You don't know? I'm going to tell you how to. Are you willing to do CPR? Yeah. Okay. If there's a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it. No, there's not. Available? Okay. I'm sending the paramedics to help you now. Stay on the line and I'll tell you exactly what to do next, okay? Okay, are you right by your husband right now? Yeah, he's so pale. His mouth is open. Okay, listen carefully. Are you able to lay him on the floor or the ground? On the ground? I'm just shaking. I can't touch him. I can't. You can do it. You can do it. I can guide you through CPR. Take a deep breath for me. I'm here with you. He doesn't have a pulse. He doesn't have a pulse? No. There's no pulse. Okay, I'm here with you. I'm here with you. We need to get him help. If you need to put me on speaker, put me on speaker. I'm gonna guide you through CPR, okay? Okay. Tell me when you've done that. Okay, I'm ready. You're ready? Okay, he's on the floor? He's on the bed. Okay, are you able by any chance to move him on the floor? Let me try. His spots on it. I don't know what's happening. Okay. I'm here with you. Are you not able to move him to the floor? Go out. Don't come in here. Oh my God, my sister. You're not able to move him to the floor? Just listen carefully. We just need to get him on the floor. Don't worry about hurting them. No, he's just too heavy. Is he still on the bed? Yes. Okay, if there's a sheet or a blanket under them, can you loosen it from the mattress? Yes. Okay, stand at the side of the bed closest to them and remove anything under their head. Okay. Okay, I need you to pull the sheets towards you and slide them off the bed. Don't worry about him falling. We just need to help him now. Okay. Tell me when he's on the floor. I can't move it. It's just dead weight. Like it's just... You're not. If he has sheets under, pull them to the floor. Don't worry about hurting him. Can you please send somebody? Okay, I have the ambulance that's on the way. Okay, there's another way to do this, okay? Grab their feet. Grab his feet. Okay. Slide them towards you until they're just off the bed. Okay. How old is your husband? 39. 39? Yeah. Okay. Okay, were you able to pull his feet off the bed? I'm pulling. Okay, now grab the arm closest to you and pull the rest of the way off the bed. Again, don't worry about the fall. We just need to help them now. I have the ambulance on the way. I just need you to do this, okay, so we can get the help for him. Okay. Once they arrive, they'll take over. We just need to start CPR now. You are doing great, okay? I just need you to get him on the floor. Okay, he's on the floor. You got him on the floor? Yeah. Okay, listen carefully, okay? Make sure that there's nothing under his head. Is he laying flat on his back? Yeah. Okay. Okay, just listen carefully and I'll tell you how to do chest compressions, okay? Place the heel of your hand on the breastbone. This is in the center of the chest, right between the nipples. Okay. Put your other hand on top of that hand.
Okay.
Okay. Start pumping the chest hard and fast, at least twice per second, and 2 inches deep.
Okay.
Okay. Start counting out loud so I can count with you. Okay. We're gonna count 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Let me know when you're ready.
1,
1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4. Count out loud so I can hear you. I'm counting with you. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. If it's easier for you, am I on speaker?
yes.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you know if the front door is open?
No, it's locked.
It's not. Are you? I need you to go. Is there anybody else within the home, or is it just you?
That's all my kids.
Okay. Are one of them old enough to go unlock the door?
Yeah, it's unlocked.
It's unlocked now.
Yeah, he's here. He's there.
Okay.
Hit the, yeah. The protesting that was part of the 6-minute delay in Kouri Richins performing CPR. I can't move it. It is just dead weight. Contrast that 911 call with her self-serving text message to her best friend, Chelsea Barney. I tried so fucking hard to save him, his lifeless body on my bedroom floor. I pumped so damn hard, so hard, screaming at him to come back to life, that I needed him. None of that happened. She's covering up her involvement in murdering Eric Richins. Recall the alibi narrative at the beginning of the 911 call. Her letting the 911 operator and everyone know that she was not with Eric when he died. I was somewhere else. I was distant in place and time. When she calls her father-in-law, Eric's dad, Gene Richins, what does she say right at the outset? I was sleeping with Asha and I came into the room. Gene, I wasn't there. Wasn't me. When Eric's sister Katie arrives, he wasn't breathing. I went to bed. I was in Ashton's room. He was having nightmares. I wasn't there. It was not me. Her alibi. Her cover-up. This is the written form that sheriff's deputies gave Kouri Richins early morning of March 4th to write out what happened. It says, describe in detail what you saw, know, or heard of the incident. Where does she start? Eric and I put the kids to bed around 9 p.m. We had a drink. In Kouri Richins' mind, that's when the incident started. It was the drink, and she knew it because she put the fentanyl in the drink. She didn't start with, I walked into the bedroom at 3 a.m. My husband was not breathing and cold. describe the incident. The incident for her begins around 9:15 when she has the drink, because she knows that is in fact when the incident began. And then more of her self-serving alibi narrative. It wasn't me, I wasn't there. Before she gets into really what matters. Intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Eric Richins. We know it was intentional because she planned the immediate reaction. When she spoke with Eric's sister, Katie, very shortly after medical examiners rolled Eric Richins' body out of his home for the last time, she told Katie that she was going to plan the she was going to follow through with the purchase of the Midway mansion. She was going to sell the home that she was living in. And she had a plan for running Eric's business, C&E. The morning of Eric's death. She had those plans in place because she knew she was going to murder Eric. She had already thought about not only murdering him, but what I'm doing immediately after murdering him. Her plan with the Midway mansion is consistent with her dream of living there with Josh Grossman, running it as an event center, farming and raising Eric's kids. Her plan to sell the home she lived in proves that she had no idea that home was in a trust. And she couldn't sell it. Her plan on running Eric Richins' half of C&E shows that she did not understand the buy-sell agreement, the life insurance coverage on the buy-sell agreement, or that that life insurance coverage went to the trust, not her. The morning Eric died, she had a plan on how she was spending Eric's money and didn't realize it was trust money. We know that Kouri Richins intended to kill Eric. The evidence proves that she intended to kill Eric, in part based on her conversation with Josh Grossman shortly after killing Eric. Kouri Richins asked Josh if he had ever killed anybody. Killed was her word. Not have you ever lost a loved one. How do you agree? Not have you ever walked in and found a dead body unexpectedly. Not how do you respond to a tragic and horrible accident. It is how you have you killed. And then she asked how it made him feel. She asked that because she was working through her own feelings on killing and wanted Josh to help her work through those feelings. And never mind that that's a highly selfish question. She's worried about working through her feelings on killing. Never mind Josh Grossman's feelings on having had to have killed in service of his country. It was her feelings that mattered. The walk the dog letter. There's a lot to unpack in this. But right now, let's unpack the fact that Kouri Richins says, Eric gets pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico. She goes on to talk and says, Eric finally told me and asked if Carmen could get him some pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico. Some refers back to pain pills in Mexico from fentanyl. Sorry, pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico. Kouri Richins knows 4 months after she's been arrested for Eric Richins' murder, a year and a half after she murdered him, she knows that she bought fentanyl, and she has to explain it. And how does she explain it? A year and a half after murdering Eric Richins, she blames it on Eric. Oh, I bought it for Eric. That's the sum of the evidence. Her self-serving statement asking her brother to testify falsely that she brought it from Eric. For Eric. Year and a half after she murdered. Kouri Richins did not tell the 911 dispatcher, hey, I just bought some fentanyl for Eric. She didn't tell the paramedics, he might be dying from the fentanyl I just bought for him. He didn't tell the deputies that responded. He didn't tell Detective Woody. He didn't tell Dr. Ulmer. Didn't tell Christensen. Didn't tell her friends. Didn't tell her family. All the off-ramps she had the opportunity to take to say, hey, I bought the fentanyl for Eric. She doesn't, because it did not happen. She did not concoct this story until a year and a half after she killed him. And it is a story. It's a fake story that she wants her brother to testify to. There are, of course, other inaccuracies. Kouri Richins in the Orange Notebook writes, self-servingly, when the EMT walked up to me and said he didn't make it, we did all we could, I lost it, I immediately ran to the bathroom. This is the video of when the EMT walked up to her. We'll stop it there. We could play it for several more minutes. She doesn't immediately or otherwise run to the bathroom and throw up. When people make up stories, they are inconsistent in the retelling. Here, in the Orange Notebook, Kouri Richins says they make the Moscow Mule and the lemon drop shot in the kitchen, and then they go to bed and brush their teeth. Here, they drink it in the bedroom, not the kitchen. Kouri Richins tells her attorney, it's on the right, she tells her attorney that Eric was on the phone when she went into Ashton's bedroom. But Eric Richins' phone activity tells a different story. Kouri Richins repeatedly said that she went into Ashton's bedroom 9:30, 9:45. Eric was off the phone before 9. In the Orange Notebook, Kouri Richins says that Eric was awake when she went into Ashton's room. In that rambling phone call with Bryce Knutson that Chelsea Barney recorded, she suggests that he was asleep because she says when she returned to the bedroom about 3 a.m., Eric was in the exact same position as he was when he fell asleep. That means she was there when he fell asleep, not in Ashton's room. Her story is inconsistent in the details. That proves that much of it is fake. We've read text messages throughout this presentation. We'll continue to publish some more for you to read. None of those text messages were recovered from Kouri Richins' phone. They were recovered from Eric's phone, Chelsea Barney's phone, Josh Grossman's phone, but not Kouri Richins' phone, because they were deleted. That is part of her cover-up. When comparing the contents of the phone with few to no text messages, with the contents of the call detail records, with thousands of text messages, that's how we know they were deleted. When Detective Woody executed the first of the search warrants on April the 13th, 2022, and she informed Kouri Richins that toxicology showed that Eric died of fentanyl poisoning, Detective Woody seized her phone. On her phone that she got to replace the seized phone, on the phone that Kouri Richins got to replace the seized phone, these are the searches. What was Kouri Richins worried about? She was worried about the police recovering all her deleted text messages. Why? They're inculpatory. They would further prove that Kouri Richins bought drugs from Carmen Lauber to then murder Eric Richins. Her phone searches reveal what she was thinking. She's worried about being investigated. She's worried about having to take a lie detector test. She's worried about my office. She's worried about her seized electronics. Prison is on her mind. So is money. She's interested in the life insurance. We don't know precisely when these searches were conducted. It's just not in the digital data. We have the data we have. But we do know that she hasn't been paid out yet on life insurance. And she started getting paid out in June of 2022. And this phone she got in April of 2022. So the inference is that these searches occurred between April and June of 2022. This one's the most insightful. If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? She didn't search if someone accidentally ODs. She doesn't search if somebody is dead for unknown reasons. She searches if somebody is poisoned, because that is what happened. Now we have to prove that Kouri Richins intended to murder Eric Richins, which means we have to prove that Eric Richins did not commit suicide. Kouri herself says he didn't. No mental health concerns. But the other evidence proves it as well. Eric had every reason to live. The first three of which are Carter, Ashton, and Weston. He was a phenomenal father. He protected his boys. He put his money in trust mostly for the benefit of them, to protect them. He was a protector. He's not leaving his boys. He was also planning for the future. He was a successful business person, and he and Cody had future business plans. He had future plans with his sister. They were planning family vacation to Disneyland. He was planning on buying a cabin in the Uintas with his father for the family. Every shred of evidence in this case proves that Eric did not commit suicide. This wasn't an accidental overdose. Eric Richins did not use drugs. He did not use illicit drugs. Set aside THC gummies. Kouri Richins said no, never to Deputy Wynn and Paramedic Offred. These are people that it would have made sense to tell he used illicit drugs to in the moment as Paramedic Offred's trying to save Eric's life. But no, she was honest. Nope, never. Same thing with Dr. Ulmer as they're reviewing the toxicology and trying to explain the fentanyl, right? Dr. Ulmer's like, well, there's this fentanyl, really can't explain it. Did he do illicit drugs? No, never. Grossman, she's honest with anybody. She's honest with Grossman. No, Eric did not use drugs. Her best friend, another person she's honest with. Nope. Life insurance company? No. Chief medical examiner? No. And every bit of evidence that came into this case, everyone who testified and knew Eric well, his friends, his family, no, Eric didn't use illicit drugs. Not even prescription drugs.
Please have a seat. Mr. Bloodworth, you can make sure that mic is still on, and please proceed. Very good.
Thank you, Your Honor. Recall at the outset of closing when we were looking at the aggravated murder charge. I mentioned the first two elements are murder, and then we get into the two aggravators. So the closing up until now has been the murder charge. That is straight murder, but the state, of course, has charged aggravated murder. So now we'll talk about the two aggravators. The why aggravator, money motive, and the HAL aggravator, administering any substance in a lethal amount. You'll recall Brooke Carrington's testimony. And when she began her forensic accounting analysis, this drew her attention. The number of overdraft and non-sufficient funds transactions beginning in April. That jumped from 1 in September to 37 in October, beginning in October. That jumped from 1 in September to 37 in October to 77 in December. And Brooke Carrington's analysis was the beginning of the downward financial death spiral. Then Ms. Carrington analyzed the overall debt, and it showed a growing debt picture nearing $8 million in debt when Kouri Richins closed on the Midway Mansion. All the while, she's not paying it off. She's barely sending her creditors any money. And it's never an increasing amount of money. It's flat. The payday loans particularly showed distress to Ms. Carrington. This isn't a traditional mortgage. This isn't even hard money lending. This is, give me money today, I'll give you money when you get paid at an extraordinary, exorbitant interest rate. And when Brooke Carrington saw this, she sees the line here go flat. Payday lenders would no longer lend to Kouri Richins. She was barely paying them off, or barely paying towards them. Kouri Richins lost money flipping homes. You heard Brooke Carrington testify about the extraordinary growth and unsustainable level of growth for even sophisticated business people. Kouri Richins is not a sophisticated business person. She didn't even understand fundamental accounting, fundamental tax reporting. Brooke Carrington plotted out the profitability analysis of each of Kouri Richins' home flips. Kouri Richins, when she bought a home, when you total up the home she bought and the loans she took out, she started her projects $2 million in the hole. When she was finished her projects, of money that Brooke could trace to expenses, she could only trace about half of it to expenses because Kouri Richins did not conduct normal accounting. Kouri Richins lost $469,000 on her home flips. But recall that Brooke Carrington testifies there's this other pot out there of $400,000 that I know she lost. I just can't trace it to a particular project. When you add those up, it's nearly $900,000 loss in flipping homes alone. Recall that Brooke Carrington said that does not count the foreclosures. While deliberating, you'll have this, and on the second page, you'll see all the foreclosures. She lost millions more in foreclosures. To include foreclosures on Chelsea Barney's home and the Midway Mansion. Kouri Richins would borrow money by any means necessary. 6 times she submitted inaccurate bank statements to lenders to get money. Those bank statements reflected her business account and balances in C&E's business account. This evidence proves the level of financial desperation that Kouri Richins was in late 2021 and early 2022. The next level of financial desperation is taking $45,000 of your best friend's hard-earned cash tips from waitressing, telling her that you are going to apply that as a down payment to a mortgage on her house where she lives with her partner and her children. And then diverting part of it to pay off Fund 5 Merchant, a payday lender. And spending the remainder of it, as Brooke Harrington testified, on expenses to rehabilitate homes and servicing existing debt. Then telling your friend, your best friend, since middle school, that you applied the money to the loan, here's the deed, sign the deed, and then not filing it. You will see, if you review that, Brooke Harrington's schedule that had all the property transactions, you'll see that not only did Kouri Richins not file the deed, she took out another loan on the house. That's the loan that was foreclosed on, that resulted in Chelsea Barney, her partner, and their children getting evicted and losing their life savings. That is the next level of financial desperation that Kouri Richins was in January 2022. There's the tax liabilities. In the grand scheme of the amount of debt, $150,000 in tax liabilities is de minimis, but they were on her mind. There's an interesting little nugget here. She underreported her expenses in flipping homes to her tax accountant, which resulted in her paying more taxes than she would have. One would think a sophisticated business person would think to limit their tax liability. That's not what interested Kouri Richins. What interested her was the appearance of success in business, the appearance of affluence. And by underreporting her expenses, it looks like she made more money than she did, and she appeared more successful than she was. Because she cared not about being successful, she cared about her facade. She cared about appearing successful. You'll recall that C&E distributed $36,000 to pay some of this $150,000 tax liability, which Kouri Richins then diverted to close on a home. And her tax liability was on her mind. 2 days before murdering Eric Richins, she spent over an hour and a half on the phone with the IRS. It was on her mind because if the IRS moved on her tax liabilities, Eric would find out. She had to fix it with the IRS before Eric found out. You're familiar. Kouri Richins needed cash immediately when she murdered Eric. Eric's long-term earning potential, immaterial. She wanted to close on the Midway Mansion. She had no money to refurbish it, to flip it right away, to run it as an event center. But she was going to close on it. She needed money now. Doesn't matter if Eric's going to earn a ton of money down the road. That does not help her now with the Midway Mansion. It does not help her now with servicing her existing debt. She needs money now because she's closing on the Midway Mansion on March the 4th. And when she closes on the Midway Mansion, it's worth $2.9 million. She's borrowing $3.2 million. None of it's her money. She's reaching into other people's pockets to get that money. Not only does she want money to purchase the Midway Mansion, she wants $87,000 for herself. She takes out $87,000 at closing, and how does she spend it? Servicing existing debt and expenses for rehabs. She ultimately closed on the Midway Mansion the day after she murdered Eric. There's an interesting thought here. Did she close on the Midway Mansion in spite of murdering Eric? Or did she close on it because she murdered Eric? She hedged. She was supposed to close on the 4th. She didn't want to close until she knew Eric Richins was dead. Because she knew she would have his money. She knew she could do something with the mansion. And that's why when everybody else signed on the 4th, or in advance of the 4th, she signed on the 5th. It's unconscionable that she closed in spite of his death. It's unconscionable that she closed because of his death. This is probably Kouri Richins' true plan for the Midway Mansion. And if Eric had not put most of his assets into trust, it could have happened. Recall Brooke Harrington's testimony that after closing on the Midway Mansion, Kouri Richins' liabilities were right about $8 million, and she was in the hole $1.6 million. Her net worth was negative $1.6 million when she murdered Eric. And that her business was in financial distress, her financial enterprise was collapsing, had been collapsing, and but for a significant infusion of cash and capital would continue to collapse. That significant infusion of cash and capital was supposed to be Eric Richins' money. You have a fortunate perspective during this case in that you get to observe the defendant. You get to observe Kouri Richins. And you observe her affect with some, when some witnesses testify, and you observe her affect change when other witnesses testify. You observed that when we played the 911 call during trial, her affect was flat, no emotion. You also observe that when Brooke Carrington testified about the financial distress of her business, she was exercised, because that testimony pierced her facade. It pierced her facade of being a successful, privileged, and affluent person. It was a narcissistic injury. She was bothered because the world saw that she is indeed not a success and not affluent. The bulk of Eric Richins' estate was in insurance coverage. Some of it got paid out to the trust, some of it got paid out to Kouri Richins. Kouri Richins knew this, knew that much of his estate was insurance coverage. And different than taking money from Eric's home equity, different than taking money from Eric's bank account, to take Eric's insurance money, Eric has to die. Now for the aggravator of administration of any substance in a lethal amount. The substance here happened to have been fentanyl, could have been any part of the illicit street drug that she bought, happened to be fentanyl that she administered in a Moscow Mule and a shot or a shot. But we know that's how she administered it because it was in his belly. We know it was a lethal amount. The death certificate, fentanyl killed him. That's the substance, lethal amount. Can be as small as 3 nanograms per milliliter. And in this case, he had 15. 5 times what can be a lethal amount. That, by the way, is not an accident. That amount of fentanyl shows that Kouri Richins wanted Eric not only dead, but good and dead. Now, count 2, the aggravated murder. The elements are the same as count 1. The only difference is attempt. Attempt requires, as the court instructed, a substantial step. There's plenty of substantial steps, from ordering the drugs to making the Moscow Mule. Here, the aggravated murder count proves the attempted aggravated murder count and vice versa. The commonalities between Kouri Richins' conduct are not coincidental. In each instance, she purchased drugs from Carmen Lauber a few days out. In each instance, she spoke with the IRS a few days out. Taxes were on her mind. Eric would find out if the IRS was after them. In each case, she had an immediate financial stressor. We just discussed closing on the Midway Mansion. If you look at Brooke Carrington's materials, she had a note due on Chelsea Barney's house shortly before February the 14th. She had an immediate financial stressor in each instance. In each instance, she administered the substance in a way that Eric would ingest it. On Valentine's Day, it was a sandwich. When she murdered him, it was a drink. Notice that she learned from her mistake. One can season a sandwich with fentanyl. Eric can eat it, tell something's wrong, set the fentanyl-laced sandwich aside. You throw a lemon drop shot back. By the time Eric would notice, the shot was in. It was in his body. Moscow Mule, just to be good and sure. In each case, she leaves Eric alone. She distances herself from the dirty deed. She leaves the bedroom when she murders him. She leaves the county when she attempts to murder him. That's part of her alibi. Not only can she not be present, she has to be distant. So that when she calls 911, she says, I wasn't even there. I was in Utah County. And in each case, she has a delayed response, right? It's the delayed response in calling 911 when she murders him, and it's her delayed response in returning home when she failed to murder him. The element of, again, is it Kouri Richins? Yes. She is the person with the means, the motive, and the opportunity. Nobody else. The means, illicit street drugs in the sandwich. The motive, money, fresh start at life. The opportunity, she left the sandwich in Eric's truck. Intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Eric Richins, right? It's attempt, so attempted to cause the death of Eric Richins. The same reasons. She told Becky Lloyd it would be better if he were dead. She wanted the Michael Jackson stuff, the lethal stuff, the fatal stuff, the stuff that kills. She wanted Eric Richins' life insurance. You only get life insurance when Eric's dead. The commonalities persist. Kouri Richins ordered fentanyl from Carmen Lauber, or ordered something from Carmen Lauber, the Michael Jackson stuff, the fatal stuff. Carmen says, I told her I could get her fentanyl. She said, okay, get the fentanyl. But she ordered illicit street drugs from Carmen Lauber, who got them from Robert Crozier at the Maverick in Draper. Again, the volume of calls during the drug purchase between both Kouri Richins and Carmen Lauber and Robert Crozier and Carmen Lauber. And recall, we don't have the content of the texts because they were deleted from Kouri Richins' phone, deleted from Carmen Lauber's phone, and Crozier lost his phone. The IRS was on her mind. She called him twice, 3 days before attempting to murder Eric Richins. We know she placed the call to the Mirror Lake Diner to order a potentially fatal sandwich. We know that Kouri ordered it. Kouri picked it up in person. It was swiped. Don't know if you can tell that's Kouri Richins' signature, but notice it's one stroke. There's no pen lift. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Kouri Richins then distanced herself. She left the sandwich for Eric, and she drove an hour away to meet up with Josh Grossman on Valentine's Day. There's another commonality between the attempted murder and the murder, of course. They're big days. Losing your husband on Valentine's Day, that garners extra sympathy, extra attention. Losing your husband the same day you're supposed to close on the biggest purchase of your life, that garners extra attention. The type of attention that Kouri Richins relishes in. You heard Kouri Richins testify how Eric was a cowboy when it came to injury or illness. He worked through it all. He cowboyed up. Cowboys don't go to the hospital unless they're near death. They don't even think about going to the hospital unless they're near death. And at 11:33, Eric's thinking about going to the hospital. And then all the activity, the physical activity on his phone ceases. For 87 minutes in the middle of a busy workday. Shortly after activity resumes in Eric's phone, he calls his best friend and business partner Kouri Wright. Recall Cody said he could hear the fear in Eric's voice, a fear he'd only heard twice before, both times associated with death. A fear he heard when Eric told him his mother had passed away, and a fear he heard when someone who struck Eric's truck in an automobile accident, and Eric thought that person might have passed away. He then spoke with his hunting buddy and close friend, Josh Kays. You know and learn a lot about somebody when you hunt together and travel together. And Josh Kays said Eric sounded somber and serious. Josh asked Eric perhaps the two most pertinent questions. If he was going to the hospital, and what was he going to do about it? Let's turn to alley staking, singular, not plural. Clearly, close with Kouri. Friends since middle school. You observed the banter when Ms. Staking was testifying, the banter between her and Kouri Richins. It was friendly. She's still friendly with her. And Allie Staking testified about how a week or two after Valentine's Day, when Kouri Richins attempted to murder Eric, when I questioned her, she said, well, Eric jokingly, kind of jokingly, maybe jokingly, said that Kouri Richins tried to poison me. Perhaps joking. But Kouri Richins' reaction is what was important here. Kouri said no. She got defensive. That is not what happened. It was like an allergic reaction or something. It wasn't at all dramatic. She is covering up her poisoning him. Then when defense counsel questioned mistaking kind of backed off the jokiness of Eric's comment and attributed the jokiness to everyone else. Mistaking said, well, defense counsel questioned, what did he tell you? That he believed Kouri had tried to poison him. Maybe it was one of those joking things like, I'm sending a message to Kouri Richins. I know what you tried to do. I'm joking about it, but I'm going to let you know. Maybe he was serious. Either way, comes back to Kouri Richins trying to poison him on Valentine's Day. Kouri Richins repeatedly tries to cover up that she tried to murder Eric on Valentine's Day. She says she was home with him. She tells her best friend, Chelsea Barney, I was home with him. She was not. She was with Josh Grossman. She did not come home until after 6:30 p.m. She was saying he never broke out in hives or used an EpiPen. That means he broke out in hives and used an EpiPen. When she spoke with her mother on August the 22nd, when she says she didn't put a love note and the sandwich in the front seat of his truck, she put a love note and the sandwich in the front seat of his truck. She is trying to distance herself. She is trying to cover up. She is trying to deflect. When Eric said he was thinking about heading to the hospital, what did she say? Take a nap. Call me when you're up. She's saying that thinking he will take a nap and not wake up. When he does, Eric texts Kouri. He's asking if she's home because he had just said, I'm going to hospital. Then he had stopped communicating, or he said, I'm thinking about going to the hospital, and then stopped communicating for nearly 2 hours. He's figuring she was coming home to assist him, but she wasn't. She's in Provo waiting for a cabinet installer guy. Maybe. She says then she's going to head home in 20 minutes. Nearly 2 hours later, question mark, where are you? You were heading home 20 minutes ago. She responds, what? Thanks for answering. Did you call? You didn't call. She thinks he's heading home. She's not. She's trying to figure out what to do. She's trying to figure out what to do because Eric survived. She had not planned on that. She is delaying to make her plan. And then at 6:34, Eric texts, we're headed in there. Food is on the front seat of his truck. The same place she left the poisoned sandwich with the love note. Eric Richins is telling her, I know what you did. That is the attempted aggravated murder. That is the attempted murder. Now, of course, we have the two aggravators. They're the same Same as with the aggravated murder. The money motive, same. Similar financial distress, same. There's also the first start at life motive, right? That hasn't changed a bit. Josh Grossman is Josh Grossman on Valentine's Day, and he's Josh Grossman on March the 4th. Money motive the same, fresh start at life motive the same. Now the second aggravator, administration of any substance in a lethal amount. Recall Dr. Eric Christensen's testimony that hives, EpiPen, all consistent with an opiate-like or an opiate allergic-like response, a pseudo-allergic response. Hives, EpiPen, along with zero activity, shows that Kouri Richins attempted to administer the illicit street drugs that she bought 3 days earlier from Carmen Lauber in a lethal amount. She just failed. Next guy. Okay, the insurance fraud. There are two insurance frauds. Let me distinguish them, please, for you. The first one is a scheme charge, a fraud scheme. The second one is a fraud claim charge. Count 3, the scheme charge relates to the $100,000 true stage policy. We're going to put it up in a minute. The fraud claim charge relates to the $250,000 true stage policy. The forgery, which we will get to, is a forgery related to count 3, the scheme charge. Let me unpack them now. Okay. Different than the aggravated murder and attempted aggravated murder, I'll address all elements of the insurance fraud scheme kind of at once because they all jump out of this single page. And the scheme is quite simple. Kouri Richins wanted to murder Eric Richins, thus took out an insurance policy on his life to get money for murdering Eric Richins. Then she murdered Eric Richins, and then she submitted a claim to get the money. That is the scheme. And we know it was Kouri Richins because everything on this application for this $100,000 true stage insurance policy returns to Kouri Richins. Kouri Richins received the application because she was a member of PedFed. The application was addressed to her at her work address, so she would have been the one to receive it. If there was any questions about it, any further follow-up mailings about it, they would go to her and not to Eric. This applicant information is all her, but the partner information is all her as well. Her work address, no email address where they could contact Eric. We'll get to the Social Security number in a minute. The primary phone, that's not Eric's phone. You'll see that Eric's phone is 801-792-9317. And when you look at this closely during deliberations, you'll see that was originally a 7 that she later marked up to read like an 8. She initially wrote his correct phone number, then did not want anyone from True States to call him, so she changed the 7 to an 8. So that Eric would never know that this policy existed. After Kouri Richins took $250,000 out of Eric's home equity, he put all of his insurance that he knew about into the trust. If Eric had filled this out, the beneficiary would have been the trust, not Kouri Richins. Then we'll get to the signature. That's the fraud count 5 as well. It plays into this. We'll talk to it during count 3. But it's also the freestanding charge in count 5. Let's go to the next page. The Social Security number was blacked out for privacy reasons on the application we just reviewed. But you'll recall Ann Coates testifying that the last 6 digits were transposed. We all know our own Social Security numbers. We often get a little bit confused on our spouses. Eric did not sign the application. Matt Throckmorton, the handwriting expert. Eric did not sign it. It was probably a simulated forgery. Recall his testimony that Eric Richins has pen lifts in his signature. The forged one didn't have any pen lifts. You'll see Kouri Richins' signature throughout this case. No pen lifts. Then, Kouri Richins filed a claim for this $100,000 True Stage policy. It's actually the same claim for both policies. And she said she really does not know where her husband, Eric, got the fentanyl from. Of course she knows. She ordered it from Carmen Lauber. That is the fraud scheme. Plan to kill Eric, fill out life insurance so I can get money for killing Eric, kill Eric, and then claim the money. Now for the insurance fraud claim count 4. This is the True Stage $250,000 policy. This is the claimant's statement filled out. Kouri Richins beneficiary, Kouri Richins email, Kouri Richins address. Everything about this claim says Kouri Richins is submitting this claim. And then, like before, the fraud here, the falseness of it is she says she doesn't know where the fentanyl came from, when in fact she ordered illicit street drugs from Carmen Lauber. And indeed, later in the Walk the Dog letter, admits to asking Carmen for fentanyl. Finally, count 5, the forgery charge. We've discussed most of the forgery when we discussed count 3. But there's this without the authority to do so element. It's not a forgery if Eric gave Kouri Richins permission. The state has to prove that Kouri Richins did not sign Eric's name with permission, with authority. All of the evidence in this case proves that Kouri Richins does not ask for permission, she takes. She took with the home equity loan. She took other people's money. She's a taker, not an asker. Finally, like I mentioned earlier, Eric Richins, the evidence proves, would have put the trust as the beneficiary, not Kouri Richins. If he had given permission, it would have been permission to make the trust the beneficiary. That's the forgery charge. Let's please now turn to Kouri's motive for a fresh start at life. You heard the instructions. The state does not have to prove any motive except for the pecuniary gain motive because it's an aggravator. But motive explains why Kouri murdered Eric Richins, why she attempted to murder him. Motive explains a lot here. These texts at this point are familiar. The day after Kouri Richins speaks with Becky Lloyd and tells Becky Lloyd she would be better if Eric were dead, she texts Josh Grossman that she's in love with him, a man not her husband. If I was divorced right now and asked you to marry me, would you? That's the day after the attempted murder. If he could just go away and you could just be here, life would be so perfect. We're familiar with this text. We've read it already today. I ask you to read it again. This time, replace the word divorce with the word murder. This graphic shows a juxtaposition between Josh and Eric that is insightful to what Kouri thinks about each of them. In each instance, she is texting, well, she is kind of simultaneously texting. These are laid out chronologically. She is simultaneously texting with both Josh and Eric about closing on the Midway mansion. And she is so excited texting with Josh. I can't believe it. I want to celebrate with you. Love you, love you, love you. Thank you for always being my support, shoulder, and rock. I need you all the time. Some things I could never do without your encouragement. You have no idea how much I appreciate you. Eric tries to reach out. You want a shot? Can't. Sorry, busy. Then right back to Josh Grossman. To me, you're worth millions a year. I'm honored to be your best friend, your lover, your go-to. Life is going to be different, I promise. You're one hell of a patient person. I hate your hard days. I wish I could be there to turn them around for you. Can I try Friday? Give me a few days. Hang in there until then, please. By Friday, of course, Eric Richins was dead. Kouri had murdered him. She's right. Life's going to be different. She promised him. It was. Then, 16 days after Kouri Richins murdered Eric. Are we there yet? And then 1 month later, Kouri's ready for Josh to be her husband. Josh Grossman loved Kouri Richins. He believed that she loved him. Not sure that's true. You saw him testify. He was gutted. As a grown-ass man, gutted. You also observed Kouri Richins' affect when he testified. Flat. The evidence proves that Kouri Richins attempted to murder Eric Richins, and that she committed 2 counts of insurance fraud and forgery. The evidence does not support any other rational explanation. The state, since its opening statement, has stressed the requirement to consider the evidence that has been admitted and not what the attorneys say. What the attorneys say, insinuate, speculate, is not evidence. Please let me show you why the state has stressed this. In the defense's opening statement, counsel said that the evidence will show that Kouri Richins had a 1/2 interest in the Willow Court home. There is no evidence of that, and indeed contrary evidence. Defense counsel said that the evidence would show that Eric was always checking Kouri's phone. There's no evidence of that. Defense counsel said that the evidence will show Eric and Kouri Richins went to marriage counseling. There's no evidence of that. Defense counsel said that the evidence will show in the few weeks before Eric died, his closest friend thought that he and Kouri Richins were the happiest together that the friend had ever seen. There's no evidence of that. Defense counsel said that the night Eric died, he and Kouri Richins had their drinks and set their cups in the sink. There's no evidence of that. Defense counsel said that the evidence will show that the cups were sitting in the sink and the nanny put them in the dishwasher the next morning and they still had fluid in them. There's no evidence of that. Defense counsel said that Eric talked to a friend named Scott Wagner at 10 p.m. the night he died. There's no evidence of that, and indeed contrary evidence. Defense counsel said that the evidence would show Eric unlocked Kouri Richins' phone at 10:30 p.m. the night he died, and this is the last thing that he did. There's no evidence of that. Defense counsel said that the evidence would show investigators interviewed Kouri over and over and over again about what happened the night that Eric died. There's no evidence of that. Defense counsel said that the evidence would show that law enforcement secretly recorded Kouri Richins' phone conversations for over a year after Eric died. There's no evidence of that, and indeed contrary evidence. Defense counsel said that you will hear Kouri Richins telling her family that she purchased pain pills for Eric at his request. You did not hear that, although she did write it in the Walk the Dog letter 4 months after she was arrested. In listening to defense counsel's closing argument, please only consider the evidence that has been admitted.
hours of March 4th, 2022, the house was quiet. Kouri Richins fell asleep in her young son's room, like many parents do. At some point in the night, she gets up and walks back down the hallway to her bedroom. She slips back into bed beside her husband. She settles in next to him. She reaches over, and he feels cold. Eric Richins, the father of her children, the man that she has built a life with. Something feels wrong. She pulls the blanket up around him, but something still isn't right. He feels heavy. She turns on the light. And when she looks at her husband, really looks at him, she realizes something is terribly wrong. And in that instant, in that bedroom, in the quiet early of the morning, Kouri Richins' world collapsed. Reasonable doubt. It's not just a slogan, it's not just a suggestion, it's a constitutional shield that protects the innocent and prevents the state from punishing without truth. And it is the state that has that high burden, the highest burden under the law, to prove each and every single element of each and every charged offense beyond a reasonable doubt. The state stood up on day one and they told you they were going to prove that Kouri Richins had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to kill Eric Richins. And we're going to talk about each of these, but first I want to talk a little more about reasonable doubt. I've told juries for a long time that one way to understand reasonable doubt is, are there other reasonable explanations as to what happened? As you look at the evidence, if there are other reasonable explanations, this is reasonable doubt. And you have to find Kouri not guilty. I put to you that every fact that the state has put forth to say that Ms. Richins is guilty has another reasonable explanation. Let's go back to March 3rd, 2022. From everything we've heard during this trial, Kouri and Eric were happy that night. They were celebrating. Kouri was just about to close on the Midway Mansion. Rightly or wrongly, she believed that this was going to be the deal that put her over the top. The deal that had made everything she'd done with her business, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all worth it. The night of March 3rd, they have a celebratory drink, they go to bed, and then Kouri hears one of her sons cry out. And like parents all over the world do, she goes in to lie down on the floor of her son's room. An alibi or the truth? She wasn't inconsistent when she told this story. She told everyone, I was lying in Ash's room, I was lying down with him. What does reason tell you? What does experience tell you? When she wakes up, she goes back to her room. Eric appears to be asleep. We don't know for sure what happens over the next 15 minutes or so. The state asks you to leap to conclusions about what she was doing during that time. Yet they have not shown you any evidence of this. They just tell you to believe it. But what does reason tell you? She gets up. She goes to the bathroom. She picks up her phone. We all pick up our phone all the time. Been away from it for an hour or two. She goes to the bathroom. Maybe she walks to the kitchen. Maybe she gets a drink of water. Maybe she lets out the dog. And then she goes back to her bedroom, phone probably in hand, gets into the bed next to her husband, again, realizes he's cold, pulls up the blanket, realizes something's wrong, and turns on the light. It probably takes a moment or two for her brain to register what she's seen. And then she makes that call that nobody ever wants to make. She calls 911. A big part of this state's case is that Ms. Richins is not grieving properly. You heard this from a couple of different witnesses, 2 or 3. What does that mean? I was unexpectedly widowed when I was not much older than Kouri, and I had 2 little boys. How do you judge someone in that moment? If I've learned one thing during this trial, I've learned I didn't grieve right. I didn't know that, but it's clear now that I didn't. They want you to look at a woman in the worst moment of her life and to judge her grief. There is no wrong way to grieve. They're asking you to judge how she is acting at that moment and then use that moment of evidence of guilt. In the opening, we pointed out, go ahead and put it on that the state looks at facts one way and sees a witch. But if you look at those facts another way, you see a widow. Here's an example. Hands over her face, curled up. A witch, hiding because she's done something wrong, or a widow, hiding and blocking out what has just happened to her, what has just happened to her children, which has just happened to her family and to her life. Look familiar? Portrayals of women grieving in art. Portrayals of women in grief. The state tells you during evidence that, she didn't immediately talk to Kouri Richins when he came to the house because she felt so guilty she couldn't talk to him. Or was it because she didn't want to tell a father his son had died? She didn't tell the boys when she should have. It was weird. She didn't go talk to them. They were in the playroom. Again, because she felt guilty, or because she was dreading the most difficult conversation, the conversation no mother ever wants to have with her young sons. Their father is dead. The father that everyone agrees was a wonderful father is gone, and she has to tell those little boys, you're never going to see him again. Believe me, that conversation may be the worst moment in a mother's life. How can a woman be judged on how she handles that moment? You heard her friend Allie staking. When Allie arrived at the home that day, she said Kouri was clearly upset. She said she was distraught. This is someone who's known her since junior high, not an officer who met her 5 minutes ago. She said Kouri was acting as you would expect. That night, friends came over to talk about Eric, to drink to Eric. Awake is what the Irish call it. The state wants you to leap to the conclusion that night, Kouri was celebrating Eric's death. You heard Allie stalking. They were celebrating Eric's life. They kept it light for the boys. They were dancing, they were smiling. All of them were, even Eric's sister. Can we not smile in our grief? They want to tell you no. But reason and experience tells you differently. Let's talk about the investigation. The investigation in this matter was nothing but sloppy. It was driven by bias. Did you notice during the state's closing they didn't really even talk about the investigation? Instead, they speculated. What was in people's heads? What were they thinking? Speculation, conjecture, not proof. Instead of looking at the evidence to determine what happened, the state they determined what happened, and then they found the evidence to support it. This is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when you favor evidence that supports a belief and ignore evidence that contradicts it. That is how this entire case was investigated, working backwards from a conclusion. It started on March 4th. Detective Woody, before she's even entered the home, Amy Richin tells her they think Kouri is somehow involved. Then both Katie and Amy Richins tell Detective Woody they think this is because she recently found out about a trust Eric created. Immediately, this influenced this investigation. But what happened that first day? They found nothing to support foul play. Kouri tells them he was a user of THC gummies, that maybe he used one that night. They never ask where the gummies are. They do a cursory search of the bedroom and bathroom. They admit that they don't look in places where the gummies were found a month later, high up in the bathroom, high above the refrigerator, high up in the laundry room, somewhere in a pocket of either Kouri or Eric's jacket in a closet. All places where they would have been put out of reach of children. But they didn't find any of them that day. You know what else they didn't do? They didn't secure the scene. They moved things around. They told you they didn't have probable cause to search the whole house. We couldn't search the whole house. All we could do was look in the bedroom and the bathroom. But they could have asked for consent. Kouri gave them consent when they asked to search one place outside of the bedroom. The entire house could have been searched that day, but they didn't do it. They didn't even ask. What else happens that morning? Officer Nguyen, he does his death checklist. He says, did he have any history of prescription abuse? Did he have any history of illicit drug use? And what does Kouri tell him? No. How easy would it have been to just say yes? If she had just killed him with illicit drugs, why in the name of God did she just not say yes? Had she said yes, we probably wouldn't all be sitting here today. She didn't say yes because she did not know how he had died. Over the last 4 years, they've gone back to that house 10 more times. And they still can't tell you what happened the early morning of March 4th, 2022. 10 warrants, that's a lot. That's not typical. They were still searching for evidence on February 9th of this year, 2 weeks before trial. 4 years of investigation, and they are still trying to find evidence to make their case because they know they don't have enough. They're still trying to prove Kouri Richins guilty. So let's talk about Todd Gabler. In comes Todd Gabler, the private investigator. Jeff O'Driscoll told you, well, he was an investigator for the estate. Just the civil case. Seriously? He's putting trackers on the car of Kouri, her mother, her brother. He's trying to track Carmen Lauber's car. He's providing evidence to the police. Detective Woody testified that this information from the private investigator is what helped advance their investigation. He testified he was in the house alone numerous times, finding things the police didn't, not using gloves, calling law enforcement when he found things. He said he didn't need a babysitter while he did all these things, which is different than what Clint Benson told you. He said nobody was ever in that house without me being there. That wasn't true. What he told you wasn't true. Todd Gabler was in and out of that house numerous times by himself. He also told you that he was completely fair and unbiased, testing 2 hypotheses. His hypotheses, suicide and homicide. He ignored any others, including accident. And how did he handle this unbiased testing of hypotheses? You heard Josh Grossman. He said the first time he talked to Todd Gabler said right out of the gate, Kouri killed Eric. Josh told you that tainted what he thought of next. How does it not taint an interview when your opening line is, oh, Kouri killed Eric, so now let's tell me what you have, what you know. Josh told you he started looking back at things differently than he had before because of that. Like I said, he tracked Kouri's car, he tracked her family's car, he tracked Carmen's Lauber car. He didn't track Cody Wright's car. He had more to gain from Eric's death than anyone. He didn't track anyone involved. in the civil case regarding the trust. He only tracked people that he thought might lead to information for law enforcement. Did he follow up on Eric's trip to Mexico shortly before the death? No. Did he go to Mexico? Did he try and figure out where Eric had been in Sonora, Mexico? No. Nothing about that investigation was unbiased. Nothing. He passed it all on to law enforcement. And then what he did is he said to law enforcement, you should talk to Carmen Lauber. She's on the ropes in drug court. This would be a really good time to interview her because she would be very likely to be compliant at this time. Everything about this investigation was led by the Richins family. They started on day one and they continued until trial. They are the ones who initially hired and paid for experts. Their private investigator gave the information to the police. You know, and by the way, Gabler testified that he followed all the rules of being a private investigator. And that may very well be true. But he doesn't have to operate under the Constitution. There's a reason that we have rights under the Constitution. There is a reason that law enforcement has to get warrants to enter your home, to take electronics, to search your house. It is to protect the citizens of our country. It is to protect the innocent. Sidestepping these important constitutional rights by hiring a private investigator who then let law enforcement know what to do taints this entire investigation. And you know what? That is terrifying. It's terrifying. If someone has enough money to hire a PI, they can circumvent our constitutional rights, dig into every aspect of our rights, of our lives, and turn it over to police. We have a Constitution for a reason. It's to protect us all. I want to talk about the lead investigator, Jeff O'Driscoll. Here's what he testified that his investigation consisted of. He got assigned to the case sometime in March of 2023. He got a search warrant for some medical records. He thinks he got a search warrant for a couple of cell phones. He interviewed Chelsea Barney, where they discovered that they were wrong about some text messages. Law enforcement was wrong with what they thought they were looking for. He interviewed someone named Jake Sorensen, who must not have had anything important to say because we never heard from him. Then he interviews Carmen Lauber, because he was told to by the private investigator. That's it. That was the investigation. He didn't investigate any other leads. He didn't attempt to corroborate information, particularly in the letter that we saw that Kouri wrote to her mother, the walk the dog letter. Now, he told you he didn't need to corroborate that because he didn't get that letter till after Kouri was arrested. So, you know, I guess the state was done. You wouldn't want to start looking for things that might show her innocent. You've arrested her. Interestingly, they were still executing search warrants. They were still trying to find evidence for guilt, but they weren't looking at any evidence that might show innocence. It is absolutely possible that everything she said in that letter was true. In fact, at least 3 things in that letter were corroborated by the state's own witnesses. But they didn't investigate it. Again, ignore what might contradict your theory. Confirmation bias. Reasonable doubt. Also remember that letter never went to anyone. So it was nothing more than thoughts on paper. That's all that letter was. What else didn't he do? He didn't interview the person Eric was talking to in Mexico the night of his death, and we'll come back to that, but he didn't follow up on that. He said that. He didn't follow up on where Eric went in Mexico or who he was communicating with in Mexico when he was there. He didn't investigate what Eric did or where he went on February 14th, 2022. He didn't follow up to see did Eric go to the hospital that day? In fact, he did nothing regarding that day. Nothing. What else? He didn't find fentanyl anywhere. Allegedly, there were 90 to 120 pills of something. At least oxycodone. Where were they? I guess somebody took them, but they didn't have them. So whatever pills Carmen may or may not have provided to Kouri were gone. They no longer existed. They couldn't find or test those pills. And we do know that she bought oxycodone, but you know what? There was no oxycodone in Eric's stomach that night. So instead, Detective O'Driscoll says, well, we wanted to corroborate Carmen's story. I mean, we were going to corroborate it. We weren't just going to go by it. The story that they fed her, they want to corroborate the truth. They wanted to corroborate a story. Again, let's find what confirms our theory. Let's ignore what doesn't. Confirmation bias. Reasonable doubt. Sitting here in this courtroom after 4 years of investigation, there was an awful lot that O'Driscoll just could not tell you. Things he couldn't remember. He couldn't remember what people had told him in interviews. For example, he was asked, did you interview Eric's allergy doctor? Well, yes, but I can't remember what he said. Well, that might have been important because he testified the EpiPens in the house belonged to the children. Well, maybe because Eric had recently used his a couple of weeks earlier when he had an allergic reaction. He said, well, if I could have a few minutes, I could find out what was said. I could give you more information. We were in trial. He was on the stand 4 years after Eric had died. 3 years after he'd been appointed as lead investigator. And either he wasn't prepared to testify or he just didn't know. He is the lead investigator. Now the state elicited testimony from him that how could he possibly know the entire case? It's just too much. I couldn't know all of that information. But he's the one they put on. He's the one they relied on to testify about this investigation. You didn't hear from anyone else about the last 3 years of that investigation. They chose him. You know what else he couldn't testify to? He couldn't testify how the fentanyl got into Eric's system. He said, well, he ingested it. There was no evidence, none, that fentanyl was put in a drink. That was argument. Argument is not evidence, and they waited until closing to tell you, oh, she put it in a drink, without any evidence to back that up. Okay, she made him a drink that night, but that's it. She made him a drink. There's no evidence that fentanyl was in that drink. And the lead detective who couldn't tell you anything, he sat through this entire trial. He heard every witness testify. He had an opportunity to form his answers or reform his answers based on what he knew other people had said. And yet, he still didn't know the evidence. I want to talk a minute about deleted texts and the phone searches just quickly. Deleted texts. They said there were deleted texts off Kouri's phone, and that it looks like that probably was true. Why would you delete texts off your phone? Maybe because you were having an affair over the last 2 years? You might want to delete that off your phone before your whole husband's family finds out about it. Maybe because she was buying oxycodone. I mean, she asked Carmen for pain pills. Doesn't mean she killed her husband, but you probably want that off of your phone. The phone searches. So the evidence showed that Kouri found out on April 13th that Eric died of a fentanyl overdose. And that's the day they took her phone and she gets a new phone. These searches are all done on that new phone. Searches of how much fentanyl does it take to kill someone, or how much fentanyl is a lethal overdose? I don't remember exactly. Yeah, because she just found out her husband died of a lethal overdose of fentanyl. You might want to know what that means. And she texted other things. They said, oh, she texted about women's prisons. Of course she's worried. An innocent person would be worried. Anyone would be worried if they just found out that they are a suspect in a homicide investigation. She would have been scared to death. She was looking for information based on what she found out after Eric died. All right, what do we know about those last few hours before Eric's death? It's not a lot, but we do know some things from the autopsy and the toxicology reports. We know that he had fentanyl in both his blood and his stomach. We know he had quetiapine and alcohol only in his stomach and not his blood. So this means the quetiapine had to be taken after the fentanyl. Had they been taken together, they would have both been in his blood. We know there was no histamine response, no anaphylaxis, so he had not had an allergic reaction to anything in his body that night, including fentanyl. The state wants you to believe that the allergic reaction he had on February 14th was to fentanyl. If he had an allergic reaction on February 14th, he would have had one again 3 weeks later. Now, I know the toxicologist testified, well, you don't have an allergic reaction every time, and you can look at her testimony, but it was a little bit hard to understand, but I believe she was talking about, you might eat peanuts for a lot of times and then have an allergic reaction, and then it starts. Once you have an allergic reaction to something, it doesn't typically go away. We know he had norfentanyl in his body, and this is because his body had started to metabolize the fentanyl. The state's toxicologist told you that the fentanyl could have been left over from a previous use. That was a possibility. Another reasonable possibility. The fentanyl was there from a previous use. That was the evidence. That is reasonable doubt. What else do we know from the ME and the toxicologist? Well, we know that the fentanyl was not put in a drink. And how do we know this? There was only fentanyl in the blood and not alcohol. The state's toxicologist leaned toward the fact that maybe Eric didn't even drink alcohol, that the alcohol in his stomach was post-mortem decomposition. But the other scenario that she said that was possible was that Eric took the fentanyl, then took the quetiapine, had a small amount of alcohol. She testified that it would take 15 to 60 minutes for fentanyl to make its way into the blood. That alcohol takes 15 to 30 minutes to make its way into the blood. So if the alcohol and fentanyl were taken together, they both would have been there at the same time in the blood. But just the fact that one reasonable possibility is that the fentanyl was taken before the quetiapine and the alcohol gives you reasonable doubt that it was placed in a drink an hour earlier. Now the state's saying, well, maybe she put it in a non-alcoholic drink. So their celebratory drink maybe didn't have alcohol in it. There's no evidence of that, but they're throwing around a lot of theories. Why is that? Because they don't have one. They don't know what happened. Dr. Christensen and Dr. Ulmer testified that the manner of death could not be determined. This is really important. Dr. Christensen testified the ME's office didn't know enough about Eric's history to determine if it was an accident. They also didn't have enough information to determine it was a homicide. The ME had at least a reasonable doubt as to the cause of death. And the ME isn't held to the high standard that the state is. And there was no evidence that the autopsy couldn't have been amended at a later date if additional information was received. The ME testified, excuse me, the ME didn't tell you that they couldn't amend the autopsy. He just told you they didn't. What else didn't they do? Why didn't they do a hair follicle test? Dr. Christensen said, well, we don't do that unless we're asked to. Who would you be asked to do that by? Law enforcement. Again, Summit County was only looking for evidence to confirm their theory. Evidence to support that Kouri was behind Eric's death. They did not want to look for evidence that contradicted that theory. Had they done that test, we might have our answer. Confirmation bias. All right. Let's start with the means. The state did not and cannot prove that Kouri ever purchased fentanyl. Carmen Lauber, interestingly, they barely mention Carmen Lauber in their closing. The only witness who can put fentanyl into Kouri's hand. Let's talk about her testimony. Admittedly, a lot of it was painful to watch. And in some ways, she's sympathetic. But she is looking at multiple long prison sentences. And her only way out, her only way was to testify at this trial. But what she could not do was put fentanyl in Kouri Richins' hands. She told you that she had no memory of what actually took place in 2022. During those interviews, she told detectives over and over again, my brain is fried. I've been using drugs since 6th grade. My memory is gone. So what she testified to you wasn't what she remembered. She admitted on the stand that what she testified to was what she had been shown, what she had been told. Detective O'Driscoll told you that Carmen Lauber could not remember the purchase of drugs after Eric had died. When asked by Ms. Nestor if at least one of the times that Carmen allegedly purchased drugs from Mr. Crozier and brought them to Kouri was after Eric's death, his response was, her testimony was not that. She didn't remember it that way. We found digital evidence that supported that. But you know what? She did testify to that. She testified at length and in detail about something that even Detective O'Driscoll said she didn't remember. Carmen Lauber was not able to tell you that she bought fentanyl. She agreed on the stand that it was the detectives that first put the word fentanyl in her mouth, in her head. She was told by detectives in this case that she bought fentanyl. Eric died of fentanyl, you bought drugs, you bought fentanyl. She took that story and she ran with it because she had everything to lose. And Detectives O'Driscoll and Detective Maynard told her, you are getting a big, giant get-out-of-jail-free card. And what do you have to do to get that big, giant get-out-of-jail-free card? Give them the details that will ensure Kouri gets convicted of murder. You heard that from O'Driscoll's own mouth. He tried to explain it away. But he went in and he told this woman, get out of jail free card, give us the details to ensure Kouri gets convicted of murder. She had to tell them that. She had to tell you that. She had to say she purchased fentanyl. The detectives walked into those interviews not to find out what happened, but to get Ms. Lauber to confirm what they already had decided happened. Again, confirmation bias. She told them at that first interview, I literally never dealt with fentanyl. And she had reason not to deal with fentanyl. She told you that. She had a daughter who had overdosed from fentanyl. She was afraid of fentanyl. She told them that Kouri asked for something for an investor's bad back. Maybe it was for Eric. But she told them that Kouri asked for an investor's bad back. And that later she asked for something stronger. She asked for the Michael Jackson drug. She told them Kouri never asked for fentanyl. She admitted that she got the word fentanyl from Detectives O'Driscoll and Maynard. She told them she couldn't remember. She asked them to lay it out for her, to put the pieces of the puzzle together, to write it down and I'll sign it. They argued that was because, well, she didn't want to write it in her cell. That's why they wanted us to write it. Well, she could have written it right there at the table, I suppose. But you know what else? Remember? She also told the Assistant United States Attorney basically the same thing. Put it together for me. And the U.S. Attorney or the Assistant U.S. Attorney said, oh, we don't do it that way. You have to tell us what you remember. They literally offered a big, giant get-out-of-jail-free card. In the state's last question to Detective O'Driscoll, they brought up the TV show The House of Cards, but who held all of the cards in this case? Jeff O'Driscoll told you. Carmen Lauber held all of the cards. Their entire house of cards is being held up by her. And now at trial 3 years later, she comes in here and says she bought oxycodone once and fentanyl 3 times. Oh, she had her story down. She told it very nicely on direct. But when pressed, she couldn't remember anything. Not from 2022, not from 2023. She couldn't remember on Friday what she testified to on Thursday. And I didn't ask her about her mental health or her learning disability to be mean. I asked her because it explains why she was so easily convinced by law enforcement as to what she needed to do and what she needed to say. She described her learning disability as low education. Well, you can decide what that means for yourself, but one possibility is she has an intellectual disability. And if that is the case, she is more vulnerable to suggestibility than most people. Easy to manipulate. And they took advantage of this. We all saw it. They did too, but they had to find someone who would confirm their theory. But you know what? Through all of this, there were a handful of things that Carmen Lauber was consistent about. There were a few. Kouri asked for some pain medication. Kouri said that in the walk the dog letter. Then she told you, I brought oxycodone from Susan Kohler on February 11th. Prescription oxycodone. Now that's important because if Kouri had any pain pills before February 14th, these were likely what she had. She said Kouri never asked for fentanyl. She said that in all of her interviews. Carmen never asked Robert Crozier for fentanyl. She said that. She was consistent with that. That she bought pills from Robert Crozier. That the pills she got from him were light green. 15 to 20 milligram oxycodone pills. When she bought from him again, she asked for more of the same. Those are the things she said throughout. Everything she said, every other thing she said has changed multiple times. It changed again while she was on the stand. Now she says the number of purchases were more. That changed. The date changed. For the first time, she says that Crozier was the first one to say the word fentanyl. It's the first time we've heard that. Wasn't in the interviews. She's not a truthful person. There were a couple of little things she lied on the stand about. Not super important, but I'm going to point them out because they were just untruths. When I asked her if she was on any medication for her anxiety or any other illnesses, she said no. But then later, when Mr. Bloodworth asked her, she said yes, she was on medications. They were in her car in her purse. She told you Nancy Peterson drove to buy the drugs because she didn't have a driver's license. When we showed her that photo was reversed and that she was driving, did you notice how smoothly that story changed? Oh, well, yeah, I drove one way, she drove the other. By the way, where's Nancy Peterson? There was someone who might have been able to confirm Carmen's story, but we didn't hear from her. What else did Carmen lie about? She said on that stand, and she told you, I never violated drug court after I got out, my get out of jail free card in May of 2023. But then when confronted, she had to admit, oh yeah, I did. That's right. She told you, well, I was holding a can of alcohol, but I didn't drink it. When confronted, though, she had to admit that wasn't true. She said on the stand, and she told you that. Oh, I just held it. Oh, but you told your probation officer you drank it. Oh, yeah, I guess I drank it. But what's the most important thing she admitted to lying to? She lied to a judge. She lied to a judge by writing a letter saying that she had been 100% compliant with drug court. And why did she lie to that judge? She wanted to go to Vegas. And she told you on the stand, she admitted it. Yeah, I was untruthful with the judge to get something that I wanted. She was untruthful because she wanted to go to Vegas. There is a lot more at stake here than going to Vegas. She is, again, being untruthful to get what she wants. And what she wants this time is to stay out of prison. And she will say whatever she needs to make that happen. You know what else she got by telling that story, in addition to her get out of jail free card? She also got an advance straight to go and pass drug court on the way card. No more showing up at drug court. And she told you drug court's tough, but she didn't have to go anymore. No regular check-ins. She just had to text Hi, or Lauber, to Detective Maynard. And most importantly, no more drug tests. She's still on probation, still waiting to go to court to see if her charges will be dismissed. And she's not being drug tested. Is she telling you the truth about being clean? We have absolutely no way to know. She got everything she wanted by testifying to things that she admitted she had no memory of. Can you feel for Carmen Lauber? You can. Can you believe her beyond a reasonable doubt? You cannot. And if you can't believe her beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to find Kouri Richins not guilty. I want to talk about Robert Crozier, because he's also an addict, and he also changed his story. But what makes him different? First, his original story was given in a 13-minute interview while he was coming down from drugs, not in 10 hours of interviews over multiple days. Detectives came in, and they told him he sold fentanyl. They said, we already know. We know you sold fentanyl. You just need to confirm it. We won't jam you up. Just tell us you sold fentanyl. And he agreed with them. And they asked, did Carmen Lauber know she got fentanyl? And he said, absolutely. But what did he explain to you on the stand? Now that he's been through rehab, now that we know he's sober, he gave people what they asked for when he was selling drugs. He always gave them what they asked for. So when detectives came in and said, well, you sold Carmen fentanyl, Carmen asked for fentanyl, he said yes. He said, what I meant is, if that's what she asked for, that's what I gave her. What else makes him different, though, from Carmen Lauber? He changed his story from what the prosecution wanted him to say to what they didn't want him to say, not the other way around. Why do this? Why would he risk his immunity? It would have been so much easier for him just to stick with his original story. Well, let's go back. So he gives that original story in April of 23. He sobers up. He meets with the state. He meets with Mr. Bloodworth in April of 25, before he ever spoke to me or to Mr. Berman. And he tells them at that time that he got it wrong. He says, no, I sold Carmen oxycodone, not fentanyl. And how does he know this? He told you. Because he didn't start selling fentanyl until late 2022. And he sold to Carmen Lauber in early 2022. Also, his source gave him fentanyl that was so dark it was almost purple. It wasn't light green. It wasn't light blue. Okay, so then he meets with our team in October of 25. He says the same thing. He signed an affidavit swearing it to be true. He testified to the same thing at trial. I was only selling oxy in 2022. And not only that, he told you it was prescription oxy from a pharmacy. So not fake oxy that was actually fentanyl, but real oxy. And he was a bit of an expert on the topic. I think he knew more than the drug expert did. He told you, light green pills, those were 15 to 20 milligram pills. Light blue pills, those were 30 milligram pills. His prescription was 10 milligram pills. He knew his stuff. He was a pretty successful drug dealer. And he told you when I sold fentanyl, those pills were almost purple. What did he have to gain by testifying to this? He's never met Kouri Richins. He'd never met Eric Richins. He didn't know Carmen. He isn't getting anything from anyone. It's for these reasons that his testimony is more credible than Carmen's. Her freedom is at stake, so she had to say fentanyl. She has to give them Kouri. He has nothing to gain. He just told you the truth. The state told you in closing that they traced the fentanyl. It's absolutely not true. Carmen never even looked at those pills. She didn't test those pills. She didn't take any of them, according to her. And we don't know where any of them are. Where are these some odd 90 to 120 pills? They didn't trace that fentanyl. We have no idea where that is. They didn't trace any fentanyl. So how did Eric end up ingesting fentanyl? What other reasonable explanation might there be? You know, I'm not going to stand here and say to you that Eric Richins was a drug addict. He wasn't a Carmen Lauber. He wasn't a Robert Crozier. I don't think the evidence shows that. But that doesn't mean he didn't use. That doesn't mean he didn't ask Kouri to get him pain pills. He probably did. So what do we know? We know Eric was in pain. He had Lyme disease, which can be very painful. He had back pain. He had knee pain. We know he'd been in Mexico not long before his death. Look at what he was doing right before his death. So right before his death, he's texting Pedro Sonora, back and forth, back and forth. Did they interview him, like we said? No. He texts his friend Scott Wagner, more, Pedro Sonora, from 8:30, between 8:30 and 8:36, he texts him 1, 2, 3, well, these are back and forth. But between them, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 texts. He gets a call from Scott Wagner. What's his last Google search? How far is it from Scottsdale to Nogales? And then he gets a text from Raul. We also don't know anything about Raul. Maybe he made other calls. The state said maybe Kouri was calling on the Wi-Fi. Maybe so was he. We don't know who else he talked to, but this is what we do know. Oh, which this is a good place to bring up, I think, that the state did stand up here and they told you that we said things in opening that didn't come in during trial, and that's true. Strategies change during trial. But remember, we are not the ones under an obligation to put on any evidence. It's not us. We're not under an obligation to prove anything. It's them. Okay, so what else do we find on that first day that Eric died? What else do they find? The hydrocodone bottle. Whatever happened to that bottle? Why wasn't it tested? What was kept in that bottle? The bottle's sitting right by the bed on Eric's nightstand, right next to his phone and watch that were placed neatly in his charger. An expired prescription bottle with nothing in it but residue. And you can see the residue there. Why would that be sitting out? A 6-year-old prescription bottle. What might be the best way to bring illegal pills back from Mexico? Put them in a prescription bottle? Put them in your suitcase? What might be the best way to store your illicit oxycodone? Stick them in a prescription bottle? Put them by your bed? And now that bottle's gone, and nobody knows where it is, and nobody tested it. And you saw that white powder, and you can look back when you go back, but you saw that white powdery residue on the nightstand next to Eric. Nobody tested that either. So what's another explanation? What could have happened? Eric was about to take his last pain pill out of that bottle that he kept by the side of his bed. He's on the phone with people in Mexico. He's checking how long it takes to drive from Scottsdale to Nogales. Maybe he knew he was getting fentanyl in Mexico. Maybe he thought it was something else, and he accidentally got fentanyl. Maybe had they tested that bottle, we would know. But they didn't. You know what else we know, though? We know he had a prescription for naltrexone. And it appears he wasn't taking it. A drug used to help people control craving for drugs and alcohol. It's not a drug used to treat Lyme disease. There's a reasonable alternative. Reasonable doubt. All right, I'm going to move to motive. The state absolutely did not prove that Kouri's relationship with Josh Grossman was a motive to kill her husband. Josh and Kouri had been seeing each other on and off for about 2 years. You heard from Josh. He testified that their future together was a fantasy. That at no time did Kouri ever lead him to believe that she was going to leave Eric for him. It was clear that Josh loved Kouri more than she loved him. You could see it in his face. You could see it in his demeanor. You can look at the text shortly before Eric died where Kouri was trying to break up with him. The state wants you to find that the conversation Kouri had with Josh about his time in Iraq is somehow evidence or proof of murder. But Josh told you she was grieving, that conversation was about life and death and Eric and bow hunting and the supernatural, that it really didn't even seem that unusual at the time. He only thought it seemed unusual when the private investigator told him Kouri killed Eric. It's not evidence of a homicide. It isn't proof of anything. Yes, they were having an affair. Eric was also having an affair, possibly more than one. You heard there was a text about an open relationship, and they can laugh about that, but that's what the text said. And you know what? We do not bring this up to make Eric out to be a bad person. It doesn't matter what he was doing in his personal life. That's not the point. The point is that there were parts of Eric's life that he didn't share with people. Just like he didn't share with Cody that he used marijuana, or even that he took prescriptions. The point is we all have secrets, and Eric had secrets. But back to Josh. The best evidence that Josh was not a motive for Kouri to kill her husband is that after Eric died, she never did get together with Josh. She didn't show up at the brunch that they'd planned to celebrate the closing on the Midway mansion. She didn't go on a vacation with him in April. She never even finished paying for that vacation. Josh told you that Kouri changed after Eric's death, that she was grieving, that he saw less and less of her, and ultimately she broke things off. And by the way, if Kouri was as motivated by money as they would have you think, would she really have killed her wealthy husband to run off with the handyman who lived for free in one of her houses? That doesn't fit with the state's theory. The state says, look at texts. Replace the words in them with different words. They stood here and made up what was inside people's heads, what they were thinking. The state has to rely on evidence. They have to prove their case, and they can't do that. The state did not prove that Kouri killed Eric in order to be with Josh. All right, money. Money's a motive for a lot of things for a lot of people. Was Kouri a brilliant businesswoman? No. Was her business struggling? Yes, it was. Was there fake it till you make it? There seemed to be a lot of that going on. Brooke Carrington testified that money was not a priority to Kouri Richins. She could have used an accountant, she said. She didn't even use QuickBooks. And this is all true. A young mother trying to run a business, like most young mothers, young working mothers, did her accounting take a back seat to her family? Probably. The state also wants you to believe that Kouri was cheating her best friend, but that's not what the evidence showed. The evidence showed that the $45,000 that Chelsea gave to Kouri was not earmarked for closing. Kouri could do whatever she wanted with that money. All that mattered was that when she went to that closing on that house, that she showed up with $45,000. It didn't have to be that $45,000. It could have been $45,000 she expected to come in from another flip. But then Kouri was arrested and never got the opportunity to do that. That's why that house foreclosed. But you know what the evidence has shown? That Kouri, rightly or wrongly, truly believed that that Midway mansion was going to turn everything around. They were celebrating that night. If Kouri was going to kill Eric for money, she certainly would not have done it on the night that she believed she had just secured a multi-million-dollar property. And if you look at the state's exhibit 624D, you will see that Kouri actually made a profit on every single home that she flipped. She had reason to believe that she was going to make a profit on this one too. All the foreclosures, those were all after her arrest. And something else, they say it would have cost way more money than she had to rehab the mansion to live in it with Josh, which again, Josh said was fantasy, that wasn't going to happen. But if you don't believe him, look at text, look at State's Exhibit 2-17D on page 33. This is where she and Eric are going back and forth on how much it would cost to rehab the mansion. And he says, we can't afford that. We don't even have time for that. What does she tell him? And you can look at it. I don't have it word for word. She tells him, no, we're not doing that. I just need money. I just need to give the numbers, to the investors. She didn't intend to rehab that. She intended to flip it after a little cleanup. All right, I want to talk about the gifts that the state talked about in their opening and throughout trial. They made such a fuss about these. They were accessed on Kouri's phone on March 4th, the morning of March 4th. They were tied to the celebration. That's what those were about. If you look at that exhibit, I think it's 3-40, you can see that the orphan gifts were accessed at the same time, down to the second, as a picture of the Midway Mansion. So what do we know about these gifts? We know that some photos were stored in a cache on the phone, not connected to any particular text. We know that they were accessed the morning of the 4th. We know that at least one of the pictures, the one of the mansion, was sent by Eric the evening before, which likely means all of these photos were sent prior to the morning of the 4th. These were not about Eric's death. She wasn't celebrating death. These gifts were sent earlier, and she was celebrating closing on that mansion. It just doesn't follow she would kill him for money. She received less from life insurance than she thought she was going to make on that mansion. Josh Grossman told you that she was surprised when she found out about the $1 million life insurance policy from auto insurance. It appears she didn't even know that. And if you take Brooke Carrington's testimony as true, and by the way, she was a good witness. She is a professional, expert witness. First hired by the family, and then paid $200,000 by the state. A prosecution witness, sitting right here today behind the prosecution. Very different than the MEs, who are just here to tell you their findings. But anyway, if you accept her testimony, the life insurance wasn't going to fix the problem anyway. Kouri spent that life insurance within a matter of weeks and was still in debt. And you know what you heard on that phone call between Bryce and Chelsea and Kouri? All I want's the home. It's all I want. They can have everything else. They can have the money. I don't care. I just want my house where I've raised my boys. And you know what? Eric was making good money. In 2020, he told Christina Miller, the attorney he went to about talking about a divorce, that he was making, his income that year was over $33,000 a month. Cody Wright testified that they made $500,000 each the last year that Eric was alive. I believe there was testimony that there were other years he made even more. Not sure about that, but I think that was in there. So if this case was about money, Eric was worth so much more to Kouri alive than dead. Opportunity. Well, I guess her opportunity was she was the only one in the house. Who else was in the house, though? Who else had an opportunity to take those pills? Eric. 4 years later, 10,000 searches, over $300,000 worth of expert witnesses, 3 weeks of trial, the FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security, the Summit County Sheriff's Office, they cannot tell you how Eric ingested that fentanyl. They haven't done their job, and now they want you to make inferences based on paper-thin evidence. They speculated on a number of things during closing, and they want to tell you, they want you to do their job for them. Tell them no. Tell them if they're going to charge a person in your community with the most serious crime there is, they better have the facts. They better have the proof. They better have more than speculation and conjecture, because that's their job. It's not your job. All right, I want to talk about the elements. The first one, aggravated murder. Okay, so they have to prove that that Kouri Richins intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Eric Richins. The state has not proven this. They haven't even proven that she obtained fentanyl. They have not proven where the pills ended up or how Eric took them. The state stood up here and argued, well, it really doesn't matter what drug she purchased. As long as it was an illicit street drug, it absolutely matters. Because what did he die of? He died of fentanyl. There was no oxycodone in his system. There was no other drug in his system. They must prove that she purchased and gave him fentanyl. Oh, and let me talk about Becky Lloyd for 1 minute. She said that she had a conversation after a drink or two where Kouri allegedly said, oh, things would be easier, I'd be better off if Eric was dead. But what else did you hear? You heard Becky in a recording tell the officers and investigators, I don't think I can testify to that on the stand. I'm not sure that that's true. But then she testified to it. Well, maybe they threatened to bring a catch pole for her dog too. One thing I want to point out here, though, is if after looking at all the evidence, you believe that Ms. Richins accidentally obtained fentanyl when she thought she was getting oxycodone, and then Eric took those pills voluntarily and died, that is not intentionally and knowingly. That is not aggravated murder. And if you conclude that, you must find Kouri Richins not guilty. All right, attempted murder. What is the evidence of this? And again, it has to be intentionally or knowingly, and it has the rest of the elements there. She had to take a substantial step. So here's the evidence. Kouri bought an omelet and an egg sandwich at 9 o'clock the morning of February 14th. There was no evidence that she left that sandwich in the truck. To the contrary, there was a conversation with her mother saying, they think I left some sandwich in a truck. That didn't happen. Eric said he wasn't feeling well. He took a nap between 11:30 and 2. He called a couple of friends and sounded upset. He joked a few days later with Kouri and friends that his wife had tried to poison him, that he'd had an allergic reaction and used an EpiPen. Alex Staking told you that, Ollie Staking. She never said that Kouri got defensive. She didn't say that. She said they were all laughing. She said that Eric didn't seem upset or scared. It was a joke. Wouldn't be the first time a spouse ate something and said, oh my God, my wife tried to poison me. But that's it, that's their entire case. He didn't go to the hospital. He didn't do anything that day but take a nap. Eating an egg sandwich, having an allergic reaction to something, and taking a nap. There is no world in which that is attempted murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Oh, they point out that months later in text to Chelsea, her friend, that she gets some details wrong about that day. Maybe because she didn't try to kill him, and in her memory that day really wasn't all that important. She said, I bought him lunch. Well, it was breakfast. Again, they stood here and said, Eric was thinking this, Kouri was thinking this. She was, off with Josh thinking all these things. None of this was evidence, not any of it. None of it is proof. They talked about some IRS calls that she made on those days. No evidence as to what was in those calls. No witnesses from the IRS. Speculation, conjecture, not proof, reasonable doubt. Okay, I'm going to jump quickly. The other 3 counts I'm going to go through quickly, but I'm going to go to count 5, which is the forgery count. Now remember what we're talking about here. This is one of those life insurance policies that any of us who belong to a credit union get, where you don't have to do anything. You sign here for $100,000 free life insurance. And this was filled out for both Kouri and Eric. Matthew Throckmorton, the handwriting expert, all he could tell you is that Eric probably did not sign the True Stage insurance policy. Probably is reasonable doubt. And he could not tell you that Kouri did sign it. They have not proven that Kouri forged Eric's signature. And there was no evidence either way if Kouri had permission to sign Eric's name on that True Stage life insurance. I mean, let's be serious. It's the rare married couple who doesn't occasionally say, hey, honey, I'm going to sign this for you. Is that okay? But there was no evidence either way. She's not guilty of forgery. All right, jumping to the insurance fraud counts, count 3. Count 3 is directly connected to count 5, because this count alleges that Kouri fraudulently obtained that insurance policy, and the fraud was forging Eric's signature. They said there was a reversed Social Security number on there, but the fraud's the signature. So if If the state hasn't proven to you count 5, it automatically follows they haven't proven count 3, and you must find her guilty, not guilty on count 3. Count 4 says that alleges that Kouri fraudulently collected the true stage insurance policy. All that means is if she did kill her husband and then represented something different to collect that insurance, that would be fraud. But if you find Kouri Richins not guilty on count 1, you have to find her not guilty on count 4. The state has not proven their case. They don't have the evidence that Kouri Richins killed her husband. So instead, they have tried to show you as much evidence as they possibly can to convince you that she's the sort of person who would. Getting close to the end. I'm sure you would like me to stop talking, but I have to tell you, I'm afraid to stop talking. Because as I stand here right now, Kouri Richins is still cloaked in a presumption of innocence. I don't ever want to walk back to that table. As a defense attorney, that is one of the longest walks a lawyer can make. This entire case is going to flash before my eyes. And all I will be able to think about once I sit down is, what did I miss? What did we miss? What didn't we tell you that you wanted to hear? Did I focus on what you wanted to know? Did we do enough? You're about to go through those doors and into the jury room and start deliberations. Everyone in this courtroom, everyone watching around the world, we all wish we could follow you and listen in. But that room, that jury room is yours. It's sacrosanct. In that room, you get to decide. And when you get in that room and you look at the evidence, if you think that Kouri Richins might have killed her husband, that she likely killed her husband, that she probably killed her husband, you must find her not guilty. Because maybe, probably, likely, very likely, none of these reach that extraordinary burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things when you go into that room. First, you might be tempted to go around the room and take a vote for guilty or not guilty to see where you all stand. We ask that you refrain from this. Instead, we ask, talk to each other about where you see reasonable doubt. Also, if Kathy or Alex or myself did something to offend you during this trial, please hold that against us and not against Kouri. Now, the state's going to get up and talk to you again because they get the last word. And the reason they have that last word is because of that heavy burden. But when you filled out that jury questionnaire, we asked you if you would be comfortable making your voice heard in that jury room. Would you stand by your convictions, by what you believe? And each and every one of you said yes. So here's my final ask of you. When you're deliberating and something comes up that we didn't respond to, will you be courageous? Courageous enough to raise your hand and talk about what our response would be. Raise your hand for Kouri, because you are the last line between an innocent woman and the state. Be courageous. Courage is what this moment demands. The courage to stand between a member of your community and the state and demand that they comply with the Constitution, that they comply with their burden. Do not let them fool you. Do not fall for red herrings. Kouri Richins did not kill Eric Richins. The state did not prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have the courage to tell them this and find Kouri Richins not guilty.
Well, the jury's out, and that's where I'm going to leave it for now, because you can watch this entire thing unfold in real time now, waiting for the jury to return. But I hope in the meantime, you'll take a moment, share your thoughts in the comments section below. And while you're there, spend a moment reading what other people have to say and weigh in and keep the discussion going. Your perspective really matters, and the only thing I'd ask is that you keep it respectful as we learn together. I hope you're watching for Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you like to get your true crime on the go, please subscribe to Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And consider visiting our website at profilingevil.com, where you can check out our story maps and dig deeper into cases. You can also sign up for our digital newsletter, The Bolo. The only way you can get that is signing up at profilingevil.com. And while you're there, consider picking up one of my books. My latest, Wolves in Sheep's Clothing, is written specifically for you, the true crime enthusiast. This isn't a novel, it's a deep dive, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And if you're in the U.S., you can get signed copies through profilingevil.com. Otherwise, it's available worldwide on Amazon. And don't forget to send me questions if you'd like them answered in one of the upcoming episodes. You can send them to profilingevil@gmail.com. And consider sending a video in. I'll try to play it in the next episode. I'm Mike King, and this is Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.